I thought the hardest part of my life was giving up everything for my family. I was wrong. The hardest part was discovering they'd been planning to take the one thing I had left. Christmas night. I'm 38 years old, standing outside my own kitchen, listening to my parents and my pregnant sister plot to steal my $2 million villa, the only thing my grandmother left me to escape their control. "She won't refuse family," my sister laughed. "Once we're in, we'll refinance under the family LLC. By the time the fourth baby comes, the house will be ours." My father's voice. "And our debt disappears." I stood there, hand over my mouth, realizing that every sacrifice I'd made for 15 years, the scholarship, the promotions, the man I loved, meant nothing to them. I was just a bank account, a resource to drain. But here's what they didn't know: I heard every single word. And I'm not the desperate, people-pleasing girl I used to be. 1 week later, my sister showed up with a moving truck, 3 kids, and a fake doctor's note. 2 weeks after that, she called the police on me, claiming I abandoned her children. She thought she was so clever. She had no idea what I had planned. Because when we walked into that courtroom, I didn't just have evidence. I had recordings. I had witnesses. I had 15 years of proof that this family had been using me my entire life. And when that judge played the video of their Christmas night conspiracy, when their lawyer went silent and their faces went pale, that's when the real story began. By the end, they weren't just losing. They were on their knees begging. And I finally learned what power feels like. Stay until the end. You won't believe what happened next. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 38 years old, and until that Christmas night, I thought I understood what family meant. For 15 years, I'd been the dependable one, the marketing agency founder who always had her life together, the daughter who never asked for anything, the sister who quietly stepped aside so others could shine. I'd spent so long making myself smaller that I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to take up space. The villa smelled like cinnamon and pine that evening, exactly the way Christmas should smell. I'd spent the entire day preparing dinner, my grandmother's honey-glazed ham recipe, roasted vegetables, homemade apple pie cooling on the counter. The tree lights twinkled in the living room, casting warm shadows across the hardwood floors my grandmother had walked on for 40 years before leaving this place to me. Every decoration, every carefully chosen detail was meant to create the perfect family Christmas. Looking back now, I realize I was trying to buy something that can't be purchased: genuine love from people who only saw me as useful. My sister Jessica arrived fashionably late as always, her hand resting on her very pregnant belly. 8 months along with her 4th child, she moved through my home like she owned it, pointing out where she'd put the nursery and which room would be perfect for the kids. My parents followed behind her, my mother fussing over Jessica's coat, my father carrying the diaper bag like it contained precious cargo. No one asked how I was. No one complimented the meal I'd spent hours preparing. They simply settled into my space as if it had always belonged to them. The moment that changed everything came when I was refilling the water pitcher in the kitchen. Emma, my 12-year-old niece, slipped in behind me. She was the oldest of Jessica's 3 children, a quiet girl with watchful eyes that had always seemed too old for her age. While her younger siblings, Tyler and Madison, ran wild through the house, Emma typically stayed in corners observing everything with an unnerving stillness. "Aunt Sarah," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder toward the living room where laughter and conversation drifted. Her hands were shaking slightly as she pressed a folded piece of notebook paper into my palm. "Don't read it now, please. Just be careful." Before I could respond, she darted away, leaving me standing there with the paper burning against my skin like a live coal. I slipped it into my pocket, my heart suddenly racing for reasons I couldn't yet name. Children don't warn adults to be careful unless something is very wrong. I managed to make it through dinner on autopilot, smiling and nodding while my mind spun with possibilities. What could Emma possibly need to warn me about? When everyone migrated to the living room for coffee and pie, I excused myself to use the bathroom. My hands trembled as I unfolded Emma's note. The handwriting was careful, each letter printed in the deliberate way of someone who wanted to be absolutely clear. Aunt Sarah, I heard Mom say bad things about you to Grandma and Grandpa. They're planning something. I don't understand all of it, but I know it's not nice. Please be careful. I'm sorry. Love, Emma. The bathroom suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. I read the note 3 times, trying to make sense of it. Planning something. What could they possibly be planning? I splashed cold water on my face, stared at my reflection in the mirror, really looked at myself for maybe the first time in months. When had I become so tired? When had these worry lines appeared around my eyes? When I returned to the living room, I found it empty except for the remains of dessert. Voices drifted from the direction of my home office, my father's deep rumble, my mother's higher pitch, and Jessica's laugh. That laugh. It had an edge to it, a sharpness I'd heard before whenever she got her way. I should have announced myself. I should have walked right in and joined the conversation. But Emma's note had planted a seed of suspicion, and instead, I found myself moving quietly down the hallway, my footsteps silent on the runner rug my grandmother had chosen decades ago. The office door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see my father standing by the window, my mother perched on the edge of my desk, and Jessica in my leather chair, her feet propped up on the ottoman like she was holding court. The villa is perfect, Jessica was saying, her voice bright with satisfaction. Once we're settled in, there's no way she'll kick out her pregnant sister. My mother's response came quickly. Are you sure she'll agree to the investment? That's a lot of money, Jessica. She will, Jessica said with absolute confidence. I've already planted the seeds. Dave's startup needed capital, and who better to invest than family? She's got the money just sitting there doing nothing. My father cleared his throat. What about the house itself? Your grandmother's will was very specific. Sarah has sole ownership. That's what the refinancing is for, Jessica explained, and I could hear the smile in her voice. We'll present it as a smart financial move. Create a family LLC, pool resources, make it seem like we're all benefiting. The property goes into the LLC as collateral. I've already had Dave draw up the papers. Once the house is tied up in the business structure, she can't touch it without all our signatures. The world tilted slightly. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. And our situation? My mother asked quietly. You promised you could help with that. The debt will disappear, Mom, Jessica assured her. $500,000 from Sarah's investment, plus the equity we'll pull from the house refinance. There'll be more than enough to pay off your $80,000 and then some. By the time the baby comes in April, we'll be living here permanently, and Sarah will be so tangled up in the business structure she won't be able to do anything about it. What if she refuses? My father asked. Jessica laughed again, that same sharp sound. She won't. She's never refused us anything in her entire life. Why would she start now? Sarah's whole identity is wrapped up in being the good daughter, the helpful sister. She gave up Columbia for me. She gave up that promotion. She even broke up with that guy, what was his name, Marcus, because we needed her here. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her because that's what Sarah does. She makes herself smaller so everyone else can be bigger. The truth of those words hit me like a physical blow. Is that really how they saw me? As someone so pathetically eager to please that I'd hand over everything without question? She's already hinted that I should stay here during my bed rest, Jessica continued. I'll play up the pregnancy complications, say the doctor's concerned that I need help with the other kids. She'll take us in, and once we're here, we're here. Possession is 9/10 of the law, right? And let's be honest, she's not going to evict her pregnant sister and 3 small children. The optics alone would destroy her. Your grandmother would turn over in her grave, my mother murmured, but there was no real conviction in her voice. Grandmother May left Sarah this house to keep it from us, Jessica snapped. She always played favorites. Well, now it's our turn. This villa should have been family property. Sarah didn't earn it, she just happened to be May's pet project. We're just correcting an old woman's mistake. I'd heard enough. More than enough. My legs felt disconnected from my body as I walked quietly back down the hallway through the living room and into the kitchen. My hands moved automatically, clearing dishes, wrapping leftovers, while my mind struggled to process what I'd just learned. They weren't just planning to visit. They were planning to take everything. My home, my inheritance, my future. And they were so confident I'd let them. The weight of Grandmother May's memory pressed against my chest. I could almost hear her voice thick with her Cantonese accent. "Sarah, my smart girl, you have such a good heart. But good heart doesn't mean being a doormat. Remember that." She'd said those words to me at her kitchen table 2 years before she died, pressing the deed to this villa into my hands. "This is yours. Not family property. Yours alone. When I'm gone, they will try. Don't let them." I'd promised her I wouldn't. And now, standing in the kitchen she'd cooked in for 4 decades, I understood why she'd been so insistent. She'd known. She'd always known exactly who they were. As my family emerged from the office wearing bright smiles, chattering about what a wonderful evening it had been, I smiled back. I hugged them goodbye. I waved from the doorway as they drove away. And then I walked to my safe, pulled out my grandmother's will, and read the clause I'd never fully appreciated before. The property located at 847 Sycamore Lane may not be sold, transferred, or encumbered without the sole written consent of Sarah May Chen, witnessed by an attorney for a period of 10 years from the date of transfer. My grandmother had built me a fortress. She'd known I'd need one. They wanted to take everything from me, but what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that I'd heard every single word. And this time I wasn't going to make myself smaller. This time I was going to fight back. After my family left, I couldn't sleep. The villa felt different now, like a stage where I'd been performing a role I hadn't even known I was playing. I sat in the darkened living room for over an hour, the will still in my hands, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind. Finally, around midnight, I climbed the stairs to the guest bedroom and opened the closet where I'd stored boxes of my old things when I moved in 2 years ago. The journals were in the 3rd box down, wrapped carefully in tissue paper. I'd been keeping them since college, not for any grand purpose, just a habit I'd developed during a particularly stressful semester, when a therapist suggested writing might help me process my feelings. 15 leather-bound notebooks, one for each year since I turned 23. I carried them downstairs and spread them across the dining room table, arranging them chronologically like evidence at a crime scene. The oldest one had a coffee stain on the cover. I opened it to a random page and saw my younger self's handwriting, rounder and more optimistic than the sharp angles my script had developed over the years. The entry was dated April 14, 2010. I remembered that day with painful clarity. "Got the letter from Columbia today," I'd written. "Full scholarship to their MBA program. I cried when I opened it. This is everything I've worked for. Professor Williams said I was one of the strongest candidates he'd ever recommended. I called Mom first, expecting her to scream with joy. Instead, there was this long silence. Then she said, 'That's wonderful, honey, but have you thought about the timing?'" Timing. I asked what she meant. She said Jessica failed her entrance exams again. She needs expensive tutoring if she's going to get into any decent school. Dad's been working overtime already. They can't afford both. Mom didn't say it directly, but I heard what she meant. I'm older. I'm supposed to help. I'm supposed to sacrifice. I told her I'd think about it. I've been sitting here for 3 hours, holding this acceptance letter, and I already know what I'm going to do. Columbia will still be there, I told myself. Jessica needs help now. Family comes first. That's what good people do, right? I'd never gone to Columbia. I'd enrolled at the state university instead, lived at home to save money, and worked part-time to contribute to Jessica's private tutoring. She'd gotten into a decent school eventually. I'd never even told her about Columbia. What would have been the point? I flipped through more pages, each entry a small cut that together formed a larger wound. June 2011. Turned down the internship in Boston. Mom said Jessica needs help planning her wedding. Apparently, I'm the only one who can do it right. September 2014. The New York promotion came through. $70,000 a year, corner office, everything I've worked toward. But Jessica's getting married next month and Mom says it would be selfish to move right before the wedding. Jessica's special day. I called the director and declined. She sounded so disappointed in me. Each sacrifice had seemed reasonable in the moment. Small, temporary, just this one thing and then I'd live my own life. Except there was always another thing, another crisis, another moment where I was expected to step aside. The entry that hurt most was from 2019. I almost couldn't read it, but I forced myself to see the words I'd written 5 years ago. Marcus proposed tonight. We were at that little Italian restaurant overlooking the bay, the one where we had our first date. He got down on one knee and the whole restaurant went silent, and I was so happy I couldn't even speak. I just nodded and cried and said yes 100 times. We went back to his apartment and made plans. He wants to move to Seattle for his job. It's an incredible opportunity. VP of Product Development. He said we could get married in the spring, start our life together somewhere new. Somewhere that's just ours. I've never wanted anything more. But when I told Mom this morning, she got that look, that tone. She said Seattle. That's so far, Sarah. What about us? What about when Jessica has the baby? She's going to need help and you're the only one I trust. I tried to explain that Jessica has Dave, that she'll be fine, but Mom started crying. She said I was abandoning the family, that after everything they'd done for me, I was just going to leave them. I don't know what to do. Marcus deserves someone who can commit fully, someone who doesn't carry all this guilt. 2 weeks after that entry, I'd broken up with Marcus. Told him I wasn't ready for marriage, that I needed to focus on my career. He'd been devastated. I'd been devastated. But I'd stayed. I'd stayed and helped Jessica through her pregnancy and then the next one and the next. I'd stayed and become exactly what they needed me to be: available, useful, and most importantly, alone. I closed that journal and pressed my palms against my eyes, willing myself not to cry. Crying felt like a luxury I didn't have time for. Instead, I reached for the envelope I'd kept in the same box as the journals. My grandmother had given it to me at the lawyer's office the day after she died, along with the deed to the villa. "Read this when you need strength," the lawyer had said, following May's instructions. I'd read it once 2 years ago in a fog of grief. I hadn't let the words really sink in. Now I unfolded the rice paper carefully, my grandmother's elegant handwriting filling the page in English mixed with Chinese characters. "My dearest Sarah," it began. "If you are reading this, I am gone, and you are living in our home. I hope you have made it yours. I hope you have filled it with joy. But I suspect you are reading this because they are trying to take it from you. Your mother, your father, your sister. I know my family, child. I know how they operate. I have watched them use your good heart against you for your entire life. When you were small, I tried to protect you, but your mother is my daughter, and I could only do so much. So I did what I could. I gave you this house with chains they cannot break. The legal protections are strong. Trust them. But more importantly, trust yourself. This house is yours, not family property, not something to be shared or negotiated or compromised on. Yours. You have spent your whole life being told that good daughters sacrifice, that good sisters give up their dreams, that family means erasing yourself until there is nothing left. I am here to tell you that is a lie. Real family does not demand you disappear. Real love does not require you to be small. You are allowed to be strong, Sarah. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to keep what is yours. Do not be afraid of their anger. Do not be afraid of their tears. They will call you selfish. They will say you have changed. Good. Change is the point. Be the woman I know you can be. Be the woman who says enough. I love you. I am proud of you. And from wherever I am watching. Make me prouder still. Be strong. The house is just walls and wood. You are what matters. Protect yourself the way you have always protected them. With everything you have. Your grandmother May. My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading. I read it again slower this time, letting each word settle into my bones. She'd known. She'd seen exactly what they were doing, and she'd built me an escape route, a fortress, a space to finally become someone other than the family servant. I looked at the journals spread across the table, 15 years of evidence that I'd been telling myself the same lie over and over, that the next sacrifice would be the last one, that eventually they'd appreciate me. That family meant anything other than what they'd shown me it meant. I thought about Jessica's confident voice in my office talking about how I'd never refused them anything, how I'd sign whatever she put in front of me because being helpful was my whole identity. She was right. That had been my identity. Past tense. I pulled out my laptop and created a new folder. Labeled it simply Documentation. I photographed every relevant journal entry, uploaded them to a cloud storage account, backed them up on an external drive. Then I went through my email archives, searching for every message where I'd accommodated them, every request I'd fulfilled, every boundary I'd let them cross. I saved it all. Organized it by year, by type, by family member. At 3 a.m, I installed security camera apps on my phone, ones that would let me monitor every room in the house remotely. I reviewed the will again this time, making notes about every protection my grandmother had built in. I researched estate attorneys in the area, civil litigation specialists, anyone who might help me understand my rights. By the time the sun rose, I had a plan. Not a loud one. Not a confrontational one. I would smile. I would listen. I would let them think their scheme was working. And the entire time I would be documenting every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to take what my grandmother had protected for me. They thought they knew me. They thought I was predictable, pliable, easy to control. They were about to learn how wrong they were. As I organized the evidence that morning, memories I'd spent years trying to forget kept surfacing like debris after a storm. The pattern had always been there. I'd just convinced myself I was imagining it, being too sensitive, making something out of nothing. But now, with Jessica's words from Christmas night still ringing in my ears, I saw it all clearly. The favoritism hadn't been subtle. I'd simply been too well trained to acknowledge it. The earliest memory was from elementary school. I must have been 9, which would have made Jessica 6. We'd both brought home report cards that Friday. Mine had straight A's across every subject, plus a note from my teacher praising my science fair project on plant photosynthesis. Jessica's had mostly C's and a D in math. I remember standing in the kitchen excited to show Mom my grades, expecting praise, maybe even the celebration dinner she'd promised if I made honor roll again. Instead, she glanced at my card, said, "Very good, sweetie," and immediately turned her attention to Jessica. "Oh, honey, math is so hard, isn't it? Don't worry, we'll get you a tutor. You're trying your best, and that's what matters." Then Dad came home and they spent the entire evening reassuring Jessica that grades weren't everything, that she was special in other ways, that she shouldn't feel bad. My report card ended up on the refrigerator for exactly 1 day before it got buried under Jessica's art project. I'd learned early that achievement without struggle wasn't worth celebrating. That pattern repeated itself in countless variations throughout our childhood. When I made varsity soccer as a freshman, my parents couldn't attend games because they had to drive Jessica to her weekend art classes 2 hours away. When I won the regional debate championship, the family celebration dinner got postponed because Jessica had a cold and didn't feel up to going out. When I got accepted to the Governor's School for Science, my mother sat me down and explained that Jessica was feeling insecure about not being chosen for anything special. So, could I maybe not talk about it too much at home? I stopped mentioning my accomplishments altogether. It was easier than watching my mother's face tighten with worry about how it would affect Jessica's self-esteem. The only person who seemed to notice was Grandmother May. She'd pull me aside during family dinners at her villa, take me into her kitchen where she'd let me help roll dumplings while she asked about school, about my friends, about my dreams. She listened when I talked. Actually listened, asking follow-up questions, remembering details from previous conversations. "You are smart like your grandfather." She'd tell me, her hands dusted with flour as she shaped the dough. He would be so proud. I am proud. Those moments in her kitchen became my sanctuary, the only place where being capable and accomplished wasn't treated like a character flaw I needed to apologize for. The favoritism intensified as we got older. Jessica's college tuition came from the family savings account my parents had supposedly been building for both of us. When I asked about my share, Dad explained that Jessica needed it more because she hadn't gotten scholarships like I had. "You're so responsible, Sarah," he said. "You'll figure it out. Jessica needs more support." When Jessica dropped out halfway through her junior year because she'd met Dave and wanted to get married, my parents didn't express disappointment. They threw her an engagement party that cost more than my entire year's tuition. When I graduated summa cum laude 2 years later, they came to the ceremony but left early because Jessica's wedding planning was stressing her out, and Mom wanted to be there for her. Every milestone in my life got overshadowed by some crisis in Jessica's. My first promotion arrived the same week Jessica announced her first pregnancy, and suddenly all family conversations centered on baby preparations. My 30th birthday fell during Jessica's divorce scare with Dave, which turned out to be just a bad argument, but consumed weeks of family drama and emergency phone calls. By the time I turned 35, I'd stopped expecting acknowledgement. I showed up, helped when needed, and kept my own life small and quiet so it wouldn't compete for attention with Jessica's ever-expanding chaos. Grandmother May died 3 weeks after my 36th birthday. I'd visited her in the hospital every day, reading to her, holding her hand, telling her about my week. Jessica came twice, both times with all 3 kids staying for less than 20 minutes before the noise overwhelmed May and a nurse asked them to leave. My parents visited regularly but spent most of the time talking about Jessica's struggles with potty training Madison or Tyler's problems at preschool. May would listen politely, then turn to me and ask real questions about my business, my life. 2 days after the funeral, her attorney called a family meeting at his office. I remember walking into that conference room still numb with grief and seeing my parents already seated with Jessica between them. The attorney, Mr. Harrison, was a dignified man in his 70s who'd handled my grandmother's affairs for decades. He expressed his condolences, then opened a leather folder and began reading the will. Most of it was standard. Small bequests to various relatives, charitable donations to organizations May had supported, personal items distributed among family members. Then Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and his tone shifted. "To my granddaughter, Sarah May Chen," he read, "I leave my entire estate, including the property located at 847 Sycamore Lane, along with all furnishings, possessions, and financial accounts to be transferred solely into her name with the following conditions." He paused, glancing up at us. "The property may not be sold, transferred, or encumbered without the sole written consent of Sarah May Chen, witnessed by an attorney for a period of 10 years from the date of transfer. This property is not to be considered family property or subject to claims by other family members. It belongs to Sarah Chen alone." The silence that followed was deafening. I sat frozen, unable to process what I'd heard. My grandmother had left me everything, not split between Jessica and me, not held in trust for the family. Everything. To me. My mother was the first to speak, her voice sharp with disbelief. "That can't be right. Mother wouldn't cut out her own family like that, Mr." Harrison's expression remained neutral. "Mrs. Chen was very clear about her intentions. She left a letter explaining her reasoning if you'd like me to read it." "This is ridiculous," my father interrupted. "That house has been in the family for 40 years. It should be family property divided equally." Jessica started crying. "Grandma always loved Sarah more. This proves it. This is so unfair." I finally found my voice. "I didn't know," I whispered. "She never told me." "Of course you didn't know." Jessica snapped, tears streaming down her face. "You've always been her favorite. Little perfect Sarah who never does anything wrong." My mother reached over and squeezed Jessica's hand. "We'll contest this. It's not right. Family property should stay in the family, not be hoarded by one person." Mr. Harrison closed the folder calmly. "You're welcome to seek legal counsel, but I assure you the will is ironclad, Mrs. Chen was of sound mind and had this document reviewed by 3 separate attorneys. The protections she built in are specifically designed to prevent challenges or coercion. The meeting dissolved into arguments, accusations, and tears. Jessica accused me of manipulating an old woman. My mother suggested I'd isolated May from the rest of the family. My father demanded I refuse the inheritance and insist it be redistributed fairly. Through it all, I sat silent still, trying to understand why my grandmother had done this, what she'd seen that I'd spent my whole life refusing to see. It wasn't until later alone in May's kitchen with Mr. Harrison that he handed me the letter and everything finally made sense. She'd known exactly who they were, and she'd spent her final years building me a way out. Understanding my grandmother's intentions 2 years ago hadn't prepared me for watching them try to execute their plan in real time. The morning after Christmas, I woke to a text from Jessica that made my stomach turn. "Hey sis, had such a great time last night. Dave and I were talking and we have an exciting opportunity to discuss with you. Can we come by for brunch this weekend, business talk?" The exclamation points felt like tiny knives, each one a punctuation mark on their conspiracy. I agreed to Saturday brunch, then spent the next 3 days preparing. I wasn't going to confront them yet. I needed to see exactly how deep this went, how elaborate their scheme was, what they thought they could get away with. When Jessica and Dave arrived that Saturday, she was glowing with the kind of confidence that comes from believing you've already won. Dave looked uncomfortable, barely making eye contact as they settled into my living room. Jessica declined coffee, patting her belly, and launching into her pitch before I'd even sat down. "So Sarah, you know how hard Dave's been working on his tech startup, right?" She didn't wait for an answer. "Well, we're at this critical growth phase where we need serious capital investment. We've got interest from angel investors, but family investment would give us so much more flexibility and control." She pulled out a leather portfolio and extracted a glossy presentation folder. "We put together a complete business plan. We're looking for $500,000 in seed funding." I took the folder, my hands steady despite my racing heart. The cover page looked professional enough with charts and graphs and buzzwords like disruptive technology and market penetration. I flipped through slowly, pretending to absorb the information while my mind cataloged every red flag. The financial projections were absurdly optimistic. The market analysis was vague to the point of meaningless. And then on page 47, buried in a section labeled Security and Collateral, I found what I was looking for. In the event of capital shortfall or loan requirement, primary collateral shall be the property located at 847 Sycamore Lane, appraised value $2.1 million, to be placed in Chen Family Investment LLC for security purposes. The language was deliberately confusing, couched in financial jargon that someone less careful might skim over. But the intent was clear. They wanted to use my house as collateral for their fake business, and the mention of placing it in a family LLC meant they'd already planned the ownership transfer Jessica had discussed on Christmas night. "This is quite detailed," I said, carefully closing the folder. "I'll need time to review it thoroughly, maybe have my financial advisor take a look." Jessica's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, but we're hoping to move quickly. The investment window closes at the end of January. We'd need an answer by, say, mid-January at the latest." "That's only 3 weeks away," I observed. "I know it's fast." Dave finally spoke up, his voice strained. "But that's how these opportunities work. First mover advantage and all that." I promised to consider it, and showed them out, watching through the window as Jessica gestured animatedly to Dave in the driveway, clearly pleased with how the meeting had gone. The moment their car disappeared around the corner, I grabbed my phone and searched for estate attorneys in the area. My grandmother's attorney, Mr. Harrison, had retired to Arizona. I needed someone new, someone who specialized in protecting assets from family claims. Patricia Wong's office was in downtown San Jose, occupying the corner suite of a modern glass building. Her website described her as specializing in estate law, elder abuse cases, and family property disputes. I called Monday morning, and somehow her assistant found me an appointment for that same afternoon. Patricia herself was a woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes behind designer frames and a handshake that conveyed both warmth and absolute competence. I laid out everything. The will, the Christmas conversation I'd overheard, Jessica's investment pitch with the hidden collateral clause, my 15 years of documented history showing their pattern of manipulation. Patricia listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad, her expression growing more intent as I spoke. "The good news," she said when I finished, "is that your grandmother's will is bulletproof. I'd need to review it in detail, but from what you've described, the protective clauses are exactly what I'd recommend for this type of situation. They can't force you to transfer the property, they can't claim it as family inheritance. They definitely can't refinance or use it as collateral without your explicit consent, which would need to be witnessed by an attorney, meaning anyone reputable would advise you against it." Relief flooded through me. "So I'm protected. Legally, yes. But here's the challenge." Patricia leaned forward, her expression serious. "What they're attempting is a form of undue influence and potential fraud. If they continue to pressure you, especially using emotional manipulation or false pretenses, that crosses into actionable territory. However, proving undue influence or duress requires evidence. You mentioned you overheard their Christmas conversation. Did you record it?" My heart sank. "No, I didn't think to." "Then right now you have your word against theirs about what was said. The business plan with the collateral clause is suspicious, but they could claim it was a mistake, that they'd planned to get your approval, that you're misinterpreting their intentions." She tapped her pen against the legal pad. "If you want legal recourse beyond simply refusing their demands, you need documentation. Recordings if California's one-party consent law applies. Written communications. Witnesses. A pattern of behavior that demonstrates their intent to defraud or coerce you." I thought about Emma's warning note still tucked in my wallet. What if they actually attempt to move forward, try to occupy the property under false pretenses? Patricia's eyes narrowed. Then you'd have grounds for trespassing claims, possibly harassment. If they forge documents or make false statements to authorities, that's fraud. But again, you need proof. She pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. "This is a colleague who specializes in personal security systems. He can set you up with cameras that are completely legal for your own property. Everything recorded in your home is admissible evidence. I'd also recommend you start documenting every interaction with them. Emails, texts, phone calls, if you can record them legally. Build a file." I left Patricia's office with a retainer agreement signed and a strange sense of calm purpose. I wasn't helpless. I had tools. I had legal protection. I just needed to be smart about using them. The security specialist, a former police officer named Tom Chen. No relation, came to the house the next day. He installed discrete cameras in the living room, kitchen entryway, and my home office. Each one fed to a cloud storage system that couldn't be tampered with timestamps and encryption that would hold up in court. "The key," Tom explained as he showed me the monitoring app on my phone, "is that these are in common areas of your home. You're allowed to record anything that happens in spaces where there's no expectation of privacy. Living room, kitchen, hallways, all fair game. Just avoid bedrooms and bathrooms." I created a folder on my laptop labeled simply Evidence and began organizing everything systematically. I scanned the business plan and highlighted the collateral clause. I saved every text message from Jessica. I wrote detailed notes about the Christmas conversation, including exact quotes I could remember and the context. I pulled my journals back out and photographed the relevant entries, creating a timeline that showed the pattern stretching back 15 years. Each piece of evidence got dated, labeled, and backed up in 3 separate locations. By the time I texted Jessica that I needed more time to consider the investment, that my financial advisor had questions, I had transformed my home into a evidence-gathering operation. I wasn't just refusing to be a victim anymore. I was building a case. And when Jessica wrote back, "No worries. We know you'll do the right thing. Family helps family," followed by a heart emoji, I screenshot it and added it to the file. They thought they were hunting me. They had no idea I'd become the hunter. Playing dumb turned out to be easier than I expected. Maybe because I'd spent so many years playing small, making myself unthreatening, that slipping back into that role felt like putting on an old coat. The week after I told Jessica I needed more time to review the investment, I became the perfect accommodating sister. I texted her questions about the business plan, each one carefully designed to get her talking to make her comfortable enough to reveal more than she intended. This market analysis is impressive. How did Dave research the competitor landscape? And the timeline seems ambitious. What's the backup plan if development takes longer? Jessica responded to each message with paragraphs of explanation, her confidence growing with every exchange, never once suspecting that I was screenshotting everything and adding it to my evidence file with notes about which claims contradicted others. On Thursday, she called instead of texting, and I made sure to use the recording app Patricia had recommended. California's one-party consent law meant I could legally record any conversation I was part of as long as I didn't share it publicly. "Sarah, I'm so glad you're taking this seriously." Jessica gushed, her voice warm with what almost sounded like genuine affection. "I know 500,000 is a lot, but think of it as investing in family. When Dave's company takes off, we'll all benefit. And honestly, with the baby coming, knowing we have this financial security would mean everything." "When are you due again?" I asked, keeping my tone casual while my pen flew across my notepad, documenting the conversation in real time. "April 15th, can you believe it? 4 months feels like forever, especially because the doctor just told me I need to be on bed rest starting next month." Her voice shifted to something softer, more vulnerable. "It's going to be so hard with 3 kids already. Dave's working constantly on the startup. Mom and Dad can't really handle all 3 at once anymore, and I just don't know how I'm going to manage." The bed rest claim was new. She hadn't mentioned it at Christmas or during the brunch pitch. "Oh no, that sounds serious. What did your doctor say exactly?" "Preeclampsia risk," Jessica said, the medical term rolling off her tongue with practiced ease. "My blood pressure's been high at the last few appointments. Dr. Lopez said strict bed rest is the only way to avoid complications. I'm terrified, Sarah. I can't lose this baby." I made sympathetic noises while writing, "Preeclampsia claim, verify," in capital letters. "Is there anything I can do to help?" There was a pause just long enough that I knew she was calculating her next move. "Actually, I was going to ask about that. Dave and I were thinking if the bed rest ends up being really strict, we might need to stay somewhere with more support. Our place is a 2-story, and the kids' rooms are upstairs, which would be impossible for me. Your villa has that main floor bedroom, and you have so much space." She laughed, a light sound that might have seemed self-deprecating if I didn't know better. "I know it's a huge ask, but just temporarily until the baby comes and I'm back on my feet." There it was. The next phase of the plan unfolding exactly as I'd overheard on Christmas night. "Let me think about it," I said carefully. "I'm working from home a lot right now, and I'd worry about the noise with 3 kids." "Oh, we'd be so quiet, I promise, and Emma's old enough to help keep the little ones occupied. It would only be for a few months, just until April." Her voice took on a slightly harder edge. "I mean, I hope I can count on family when I really need help. It's not like I'm asking you to give me anything, just share your space temporarily." After we hung up, I sat staring at my notes, the manipulation so transparent now that I'd learned to see it. The bed rest story was perfectly calibrated to make refusal seem heartless. Who denies their pregnant sister a safe place during a high-risk pregnancy? The problem was I had no way to verify whether it was true or another lie in a long pattern of lies. That's when I remembered Patricia mentioning that if I needed investigators for complex cases, she had recommendations. Marcus Kim's office was in a strip mall in Sunnyvale, sandwiched between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. The modest location didn't match his credentials, which included 15 years as a private investigator specializing in insurance fraud and family law cases. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with a direct manner that put me immediately at ease. "I need to know if my sister is lying about a medical condition," I said, deciding honesty was the best approach. I explained the situation, the bed rest claim, the pattern of manipulation, my need for verifiable evidence. Marcus listened carefully, taking notes in a battered notebook. "Medical surveillance is tricky," he said. "I can't access her records, that's a HIPAA violation. But I can observe her in public spaces, document her activities, and if those activities contradict strict bed rest, that's evidence. How urgent is this?" "She's planning to move into my house next month using the bed rest as justification. I need to know before then if she's lying." "I can start surveillance this week. Standard rate is $150 an hour plus expenses. For this kind of case, I'd recommend 2 weeks of periodic observation, different times of day, different days of the week to establish a pattern." He quoted me a total that made me wince, but I thought about the alternative, Jessica moving in, taking over my home, executing her scheme, and agreed immediately. Marcus started surveillance on Saturday. By Tuesday, he'd sent me his first report via encrypted email. The photos were damning. Jessica at a prenatal yoga class Saturday morning, clearly participating in poses that required significant physical exertion. Jessica at a coffee shop Sunday afternoon, carrying a toddler on one hip and shopping bags in the other hand. Jessica at Target Monday evening, pushing a cart full of groceries, no sign of the fragility or limitation that strict bed rest would require. Each photo was time-stamped, geotagged, and annotated with Marcus's professional observations. I was reviewing the second batch of surveillance photos on Wednesday evening when my phone chimed with an email notification. The sender address wasn't one I recognized, just a generic Gmail account with a string of numbers. The subject line read, "You need to know the truth." My hand hesitated over the delete button, but something made me open it instead. "Sarah, this is Dave. I'm using an account Jessica doesn't know about because I can't risk her seeing this. I need to tell you that everything you're probably suspecting is true. Jessica has been planning this whole thing for 6 months, since before she even got pregnant. She manipulated the timing of the pregnancy to maximize sympathy for the investment pitch and the move-in plan. There is no bed rest order. There is no preeclampsia. Her doctor's appointments have all been normal. I've seen the paperwork. She's been researching how to forge medical documents and talked about getting a fake doctor's note if you push back on the bed rest story. The investment scheme. The plan to take your house, the LLC idea, all of it has been calculated from the start. I know I'm complicit. I helped her create that business plan, and I'll carry that guilt forever. But I can't watch her destroy you the way she's destroyed everything else in her path. If this goes to court, if you need someone to testify about what really happened, I will. I'll tell the truth under oath. I owe you that much. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm sorry I didn't stop this sooner. Be careful. She's more dangerous than you think. Dave. I read the email 3 times, my heart pounding. An insider witness, someone who could corroborate everything, who had direct knowledge of the conspiracy. I forwarded it immediately to Patricia with a note. Received this tonight. Thoughts. Her response came within 10 minutes. This changes everything. Save all communications. If he's willing to testify, we have a case. The trap Jessica had set for me was becoming a trap of her own making, and she had no idea I could see every wire, every pressure plate, every carefully laid snare. She thought I was still the same person who'd spent 15 years saying yes. She was about to learn exactly how much I'd changed. Jessica's ambush came on a Tuesday afternoon in mid-January, exactly 10 days after Dave's warning email. I was in my home office reviewing a client proposal when my phone rang with her number. I let it ring 3 times before answering, keeping my voice calm and unsuspecting. "Sarah, thank God you picked up." Jessica's voice was breathless, edged with panic that sounded almost genuine. "I'm on my way to your place. It's an emergency. The doctor just called and my blood pressure is dangerously high. She's ordering immediate bed rest, like starting today. I can't go home, the stairs are impossible, and Dave's in meetings all afternoon. I'm bringing the kids. We'll be there in 20 minutes. My stomach clenched, but I kept my voice steady. "Jessica, slow down. What exactly did the doctor say?" "I don't have time to explain everything right now, I'm driving. Just please, Sarah, I need you." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat motionless for exactly 30 seconds, then I moved. First, I called Patricia Wong and left a voicemail updating her on the situation. Then I texted my neighbor Ruth, a 70-year-old retired teacher who'd lived next door for 30 years and had known my grandmother well. "Ruth, I need a favor. Can you come over in about 15 minutes? I need a witness for something." Her response came immediately. "On my way, dear." I did a quick walkthrough of the house, making sure the security cameras had clear views and fresh memory. I pulled out a notebook and dated a fresh page, writing, January 14th, 3:47 p.m. Jessica called claiming medical emergency, arriving with children. Then I positioned myself by the front window and waited. Ruth arrived first, wearing a cardigan and concern. She was a sharp woman with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing, the kind of neighbor who noticed when your newspapers piled up or when strange cars sat too long on the street. "What's happening, Sarah?" "My sister's about to arrive claiming a medical emergency. I think she's lying, but I need you to witness whatever happens. Can you just observe and remember the details?" Ruth's expression shifted to something harder. "Your grandmother warned me about your family before she passed. Said they'd try something eventually. I'll stay as long as you need." 23 minutes after Jessica's call, a minivan pulled into my driveway. I felt Ruth tense beside me at the window as we watched Jessica emerge from the driver's seat, moving with perfect ease, no sign of the medical distress she'd claimed. Emma climbed out of the passenger side, her face unreadable. Tyler and Madison tumbled from the back seats, already running toward the front door. Then a moving truck turned onto my street. "Oh my," Ruth murmured. I opened the door before Jessica could knock, stepping onto the porch with Ruth slightly behind me. Jessica's eyes flickered to Ruth with momentary confusion before her expression rearranged itself into distressed gratitude. "Sarah, thank you so much for understanding. I know this is sudden." "What's the truck for?" I asked, watching two men in company uniforms begin unloading boxes. "Just some essentials we'll need. Clothes, the kids' things, some of my medical supplies." Jessica's hand rested on her belly, the gesture calculated for maximum sympathy. "The doctor said I might need to be on bed rest until delivery, so I wanted to be prepared." The essentials included 12 large suitcases, plastic storage bins labeled with room names, a crib that was still in its box, 2 toddler beds, toys, and what appeared to be half the contents of Jessica's house. I stood silently watching the movers work, documenting everything with my eyes while Ruth did the same. Emma hovered near the truck, not meeting my gaze, while Tyler and Madison had already pushed past me into the house, claiming territory with the instinct of invading armies. "Where should we put the beds?" one of the movers asked. Jessica answered before I could. "The main floor bedroom for me, and the 2 upstairs bedrooms for the kids. Emma can take the smaller one, the little ones can share." She was assigning rooms in my house as if she'd already signed a lease. I caught Ruth's eye and saw her slight nod. She was catching every detail. "Jessica," I said carefully, "we should talk about expectations and timeline." Of course, we'll figure all that out once I'm settled. I just need to lie down. The drive over here was exhausting and my head is pounding." She pressed her fingers to her temples in a show of suffering that might have convinced me 2 weeks ago. Now I just saw the performance. The unloading took 40 minutes. I watched the movers carry load after load into my home, transforming my quiet sanctuary into chaos. Ruth stayed the entire time, occasionally asking Jessica polite questions that Jessica answered with elaborate detail about her condition and her doctor's orders, and how grateful she was for family support in this difficult time. Every word was being recorded by the security cameras, every lie documented with timestamps and Ruth's witness. When the movers finally left, Jessica collapsed onto my living room sofa with theatrical exhaustion. "I can't thank you enough, sis. You're saving my life. Literally." She pulled an envelope from her purse and held it out to me. "I wrote you a little thank you note. I know how much you like having things in writing." I took the envelope, recognizing the trap immediately. She wanted me to have written acknowledgement that I'd agreed to this arrangement, something she could use later to claim I'd consented to permanent residence. I opened it in front of her, and Ruth reading the careful handwriting. Dear Sarah, thank you for opening your home to me and my children during this difficult time. Your generosity in letting us stay for a while during my recovery means everything to our family. With love and gratitude, Jessica. The phrasing was deliberately vague. For a while could mean anything. No dates, no specific terms, nothing that would obligate her to leave by any particular deadline. It was exactly the kind of document that could be twisted and reinterpreted to suit whatever narrative she wanted to build. This is very sweet, I said, folding it carefully and tucking it back into the envelope. Though I notice you didn't mention how long you're planning to stay. Jessica waved her hand dismissively. Oh, just until the baby comes and I'm back on my feet. These things are hard to predict exactly. The doctor said it could be a few weeks or it could be the full 4 months until delivery, depending on how my blood pressure responds to rest. She settled deeper into the cushions already claiming the space. I'm just so relieved to be somewhere safe. Ruth spoke up for the first time since Jessica's arrival, her voice pleasant but her words pointed. Jessica, dear, I didn't realize you were having such serious medical issues. Which doctor are you seeing? My niece is an OB nurse at Good Samaritan, maybe she knows them. Jessica's smile tightened fractionally. Dr. Lopez at Bay Area Women's Health. But I'd rather not have too many people knowing about my condition. It's private, you understand. Of course, Ruth said smoothly. I just want to make sure you're getting the best care. High blood pressure during pregnancy is no joke. After Ruth left with a meaningful look that told me she'd be available whenever I needed her testimony, I helped Emma get the younger children settled while Jessica remained on the sofa directing operations like a general from her command post. Tyler wanted to explore every room. Madison cried for snacks I didn't have. Emma silently unpacked with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, and I wondered how many times Jessica had uprooted them for her schemes. That night after the children were finally asleep and Jessica had retired to the main floor bedroom with complaints about her headache, I sat in my home office and added Ruth's contact information to my evidence file. I photographed Jessica's note from every angle, noting the date and circumstances of receiving it. I reviewed the security footage of the moving truck, the unloading Jessica's casual walk from the car showing no sign of medical distress. They'd moved in just as they'd planned on Christmas night, but they'd done it on my terms with my witnesses, with every lie documented and every manipulation caught on camera. Jessica thought she'd won. She thought she'd successfully invaded and that my kindness would trap me into letting her stay. She had no idea she'd just given me everything I needed to destroy her in court. I gave Jessica exactly 48 hours to settle in before I made my first move. On Thursday morning, while she was still asleep and the children were eating cereal at my kitchen table, I drove to the post office with an envelope that would change everything. Inside was a formal notice I'd drafted with Patricia's guidance printed on legal letterhead that made it impossible to dismiss as a casual suggestion. Notice to vacate premises, it read. To Jessica Martinez. You are hereby notified that your temporary stay at the property located at 847 Sycamore Lane must end no later than February 13, 2025, 30 days from the date of this notice. This property is privately owned, and you are occupying it as a guest at the owner's discretion. Failure to vacate by the specified date will result in legal action for unlawful occupation. This notice is being sent via certified mail with return receipt requested to ensure proper documentation of delivery. I'd also sent copies to my parents at their address establishing that they were aware of the timeline and complicit if Jessica stayed beyond it. The postal clerk processed the certified mail with bureaucratic efficiency, handing me the receipt that would prove Jessica had been properly notified. Patricia had been explicit about this step. In California, even guests who overstayed their welcome had rights, and evicting them required proper legal notice. 30 days was the minimum for someone who wasn't paying rent. The certified mail with return receipt would prove Jessica had received clear notice of when she needed to leave, eliminating any future claims that she hadn't understood the arrangement was temporary. I returned home to find Jessica awake and holding court in my living room on the phone with what sounded like a friend, describing her heroic sister who took her in during a medical crisis. She gave me a bright smile and a little wave, completely unaware that legal papers with her name on them were already in the postal system. Marcus Kim's surveillance reports arrived like clockwork over the next 3 weeks, each one more damning than the last. The first batch came on Friday, just 3 days after Jessica moved in. I opened the encrypted files on my laptop and felt a grim satisfaction as the photos loaded. Jessica at a nail salon on Wednesday afternoon, her feet soaking in a pedicure bath, while a technician worked on her hands. The timestamp showed 2:15 p.m., just 5 hours after she'd told me she needed to stay in bed all day because her blood pressure medication was making her dizzy. Marcus had captured her laughing with the technician, her face showing no sign of the distress she performed so convincingly at home. The weekend surveillance was even better. Saturday morning at 10 a.m., Jessica was photographed entering a prenatal yoga studio, wearing expensive athletic wear and carrying a yoga mat under her arm. Marcus had positioned himself across the street with a telephoto lens documenting her arrival and departure 90 minutes later. She looked energized, healthy, glowing with the kind of vitality that strict bed rest would make impossible. Sunday brought images of Jessica at a farmer's market, pushing Madison in a stroller with one hand while carrying a canvas bag full of produce in the other. Tyler and Emma walked beside her, and in one particularly clear shot, Jessica was bent down, tying Madison's shoe, a position that required significant physical flexibility and core strength. But the evidence that would prove most valuable came from Monday afternoon. Marcus had followed Jessica to an upscale day spa in Los Gatos, a place I recognized from its distinctive turquoise awning. She'd stayed for over 2 hours, and Marcus had managed to get photos of her entering and leaving, plus a shot of the spa's menu board prominently displaying hot stone massage, deep tissue therapy, prenatal wellness package. When she emerged, her hair was damp, and she looked thoroughly relaxed, chatting on her phone and showing none of the careful movements of someone whose pregnancy was high risk. I compiled each photo into a detailed timeline, cross-referencing them with the excuses Jessica had given me on those same days. Wednesday. Too dizzy to get up. Saturday. Resting in bed all day, doctor's orders. Sunday. Just taking it easy, might watch some TV. Monday. Feeling really weak. Could you pick up some groceries? Every lie documented, every contradiction preserved with timestamps and location data that would be impossible to dispute. The certified mail receipt came back in week 2, Jessica's signature scrawled across the proof of delivery. She'd signed for it on a Tuesday morning while I was at a client meeting, and when I returned home that afternoon, she was waiting for me with the opened envelope in her hand and fury in her eyes. "What the hell is this?" She waved the notice at me, her voice sharp enough to cut. "You're evicting me. I'm 8 months pregnant with a high-risk condition, and you're throwing me out." I kept my voice level, aware that the security cameras were recording every word. "It's a 30-day notice, Jessica. You moved in without us discussing any specific arrangement or timeline. I need to establish clear expectations. I told you it would be until the baby comes. That's only 3 more months." Her hand went to her belly, the gesture automatic, now a shield she raised whenever challenged. "The notice gives you until February 13th. That's 4 weeks from when you moved in, which is more than reasonable for an emergency stay. If you need housing after that, you and Dave should make other arrangements." "Dave can't afford another place right now, not with the startup costs, and Mom and Dad's place is too small for all of us." She was building toward tears now, her voice taking on that trembling quality that had always worked on our parents. "I can't believe you're doing this. What happened to family?" "Family is why I let you stay at all," I said quietly. "But this is my home, Jessica, not a hotel. 4 weeks is generous." She tried everything over the next few days. Tears, anger, guilt, appeals to our shared history. She called our parents, who immediately phoned me with identical speeches about heartlessness and family obligation. My mother actually cried, saying she didn't recognize me anymore, that I'd become cold and selfish. My father threatened to drive over and talk sense into me, though he never actually appeared. Jessica recruited Emma to ask me in her small, serious voice if they were going to be homeless, a manipulation so transparent I nearly confronted Jessica right then, before remembering my strategy required patience. Through it all, I maintained the same calm response. The notice stood February 13th, was the deadline. They had 4 weeks to make other plans. February 13th arrived on a rainy Thursday. I'd taken the day off work, wanting to be present for whatever happened next. Jessica made no move to pack. In fact, she'd unpacked more over the past month, spreading her family's belongings through my home like roots digging into soil. Children's artwork covered my refrigerator. Their toys had colonized the living room. Jessica's maternity clothes hung in the main bedroom closet as if she'd always lived there. At 8 a.m., I knocked on her bedroom door. "Jessica, it's February 13th. We need to discuss your departure plans." She opened the door wearing pajamas, her expression defiant. "I'm not leaving Sarah. I have nowhere to go, and I'm not putting my children at risk by moving during my pregnancy. If you want me out, you'll have to forcibly evict me, and good luck getting a judge to side with you over a pregnant woman." There it was. The refusal I'd been expecting, needed even. "So you're refusing to honor the 30-day notice?" "I'm refusing to endanger my family based on your arbitrary deadline. Sue me if you want. We both know how that would look." She started to close the door, then paused. "Oh, and I called my lawyer yesterday. He says you can't legally evict me without cause, and my medical condition qualifies as a legitimate reason to stay. So get comfortable, sis. We're going to be roommates for a while." The door closed in my face. I stood there for a moment, then walked calmly to my office and called Patricia Wong. She refused to leave. "We're officially in trespassing territory now." Patricia's voice was crisp and satisfied. "Perfect. Now we can file. How's your evidence file looking?" I glanced at my computer screen at the folders full of photos, recordings, documents, and witness statements. "Comprehensive. Then let's give your sister exactly what she asked for. Let's go to court." Patricia filed the lawsuit on February 18th, 5 days after Jessica's refusal to vacate gave us the final piece we needed. I met her at the Superior Court of Santa Clara County on a gray Monday morning, carrying a folder thick with evidence that represented months of careful documentation. The courthouse smelled like floor polish and old paper, and I felt strangely calm as we approached the clerk's window. This was it. The point of no return. The complaint ran to 23 pages, each one a detailed account of how my family had conspired to defraud me. Patricia had organized it into 5 counts, each building on the last to create an undeniable picture of deliberate wrongdoing. Count 1 was civil trespass, documenting Jessica's refusal to leave after proper 30-day notice. Count 2 was defamation, though Patricia explained we'd need to prove damages from any false statements Jessica had made about me. Count 3 was intentional infliction of emotional distress, using my 15 years of journals to establish a pattern of manipulation that had culminated in this elaborate scheme. Count 4 was attempted fraud, centered on the business plan with its hidden collateral clause, and Jessica's plan to transfer my property into a family LLC without my genuine consent. Count 5 was civil harassment, documenting the constant pressure, guilt-tripping, and emotional manipulation. The filing fee was $435. I watched Patricia write the check, thinking about how that amount was less than what Jessica had spent at the day spa while claiming to be bedridden. We listed 4 defendants: Jessica Martinez, David Martinez, Robert Chen, and Linda Chen. My parents and brother-in-law were named as co-conspirators, having participated in the Christmas night planning session, and in my parents' case, continuing to pressure me even after the eviction notice was served. "The process server will deliver the summons within the next few days," Patricia explained as we left the courthouse. "They'll each receive a copy of the complaint along with a summons requiring them to respond within 30 days. Expect them to be shocked. People who've gotten away with manipulation for years never really believe there will be consequences. The process server reached Jessica first on a Wednesday afternoon while I was deliberately away from the house at a coffee shop. I'd given the server a description and a schedule of when she was likely to be home. My phone rang at 2:15 with Jessica's number and I let it go to voicemail. She called 4 more times in rapid succession before leaving a message, her voice shaking with rage and something that might have been fear. "Sarah, what the fuck did you do? I just got served with a lawsuit. You're suing me." "For what? Letting you help your own sister? This is insane. This is evil. Call me back right now. We need to talk about this before you make the biggest mistake of your life." My parents received their summons that evening at their home. My mother called at 8 p.m. sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "How could you sue your own parents? We raised you, we fed you, we loved you, and this is how you repay us, by dragging us to court like criminals." I kept my voice steady, repeating the lines Patricia had helped me prepare. "You participated in a conspiracy to defraud me of my property. You knew what Jessica was planning and you helped her. The lawsuit lays out the evidence. If you want to discuss it, you can contact my attorney." I gave her Patricia's number and ended the call. Dave's reaction was different. He received his summons on Thursday morning at his office, and within an hour I had an email from the anonymous account he'd used before. "Sarah, I just got served. I understand why I'm named and I deserve it for my part in this. But I meant what I said before. I will testify truthfully about everything I know. I'm meeting with a lawyer today to discuss removing myself as a defendant by cooperating fully with your case. I'm done protecting Jessica's lies. Dave." Patricia was delighted when I forwarded her the email. "An insider willing to testify changes everything. If he provides sworn testimony about the planning, the fake medical claims, the investment scam, we won't just win, we'll demolish them." Dave filed his response to the lawsuit within a week, a rare move that showed he was serious about cooperation. His attorney submitted a motion to be removed as a defendant in exchange for full cooperation, including providing evidence and testimony. Patricia reviewed the motion and the accompanying affidavit where Dave outlined everything he knew. "This is gold," she said during our phone call. "He's admitting to helping create the fraudulent business plan, he's confirming the Christmas conversation happened, and he's providing text messages between him and Jessica that show premeditation." The discovery phase began in March, a formal process where both sides could request documents and information from each other. Patricia sent out interrogatories, written questions that each defendant had to answer under oath. The questions were pointed and specific. Describe in detail all conversations regarding Sarah Chen's property that occurred in December 2024. Provide copies of all medical records related to Jessica Martinez's pregnancy. List all sources of income and debt for Robert and Linda Chen. Jessica's responses came back evasive and incomplete, exactly what Patricia had expected. She claimed not to remember specific conversations, said her medical records were private, despite having used her medical condition as justification for her actions, and generally stonewalled every question. But California law gave Patricia tools to compel answers, and she filed motions that forced Jessica to produce documents she'd rather have kept hidden. My parents' financial disclosure arrived in late March, and reading it felt like watching a car crash in slow motion. The interrogatory about their debts revealed what Dave had told me, $83,459 in combined credit card debt and personal loans. The creditors' names told the story Patricia needed them to tell. Golden Gate Casino, San Jose Card Room, VegasOnline.com, Pacific Poker Palace. Line after line of gambling debt, some of it years old, some as recent as December. My mother had been making minimum payments that barely covered the interest, drowning slowly in a hole she'd dug with slot machines and online poker. Patricia highlighted the December charges in yellow. Look at the dates. Your mother ran up $6,000 in new debt in the 2 weeks before Christmas, right when they were planning the villa takeover. She was gambling desperately, probably thinking Jessica's scheme would save her. But the most damaging evidence came from Dave's voluntary disclosure. He provided screenshots of text conversations between him and Jessica, conversations that showed calculation and planning that went back 6 months exactly as he'd warned me. In November, before Jessica was even visibly pregnant, she'd texted him, "Started working on Sarah, planted seeds about needing help with the baby. She's so predictable, she'll offer before I even have to ask." In December, right after Christmas. Phase 1 complete. Parents are on board, they're desperate enough to do anything. Sarah suspects nothing. And then, most damning of all, a conversation with a friend where Jessica had written, "Once I get control of the house and the investment money, I'm filing for divorce." Dave's served his purpose. I'll get primary custody easy, and then I'll have everything I need. I read that last message 3 times, thinking about Dave working late hours on a startup he probably knew was doomed, thinking he was building a future for his family, while his wife planned to discard him the moment she'd extracted everything she could from me. The cruelty was breathtaking. Patricia organized all the discovery materials into a binder that grew fatter each week. The gambling debts, the text messages, Dave's testimony about the fake bed rest, Marcus Kim's surveillance photos, the security camera footage, my journals, the business plan with its hidden collateral clause. Every piece fit together into a narrative so clear that even someone who wanted to doubt it couldn't. "They're going to try to settle," Patricia predicted in early April. "Once they see how much evidence we have, once they realize Dave is testifying against them, they'll panic and offer to settle. The question is whether you want to accept." I thought about my grandmother's letter about being strong about protecting what was mine. "No settlement," I said. "I want this in front of a judge. I want the truth on record. I want them to face consequences for once in their lives." Patricia smiled, the expression of a lawyer who'd found a client willing to fight. "Then let's give them a trial they'll never forget." The court-ordered mediation was scheduled for April 25th in a windowless conference room that smelled faintly of stale coffee and desperation. California law required us to attempt settlement before trial, a mandatory step designed to reduce the court's caseload by encouraging parties to resolve disputes privately. I arrived 15 minutes early with Patricia, both of us carrying briefcases filled with evidence organized into color-coded tabs. The mediator was already there, a woman named Janet Torres, who'd been a family court judge for 20 years before retiring to private mediation practice. She had steel-gray hair cut in a practical bob, and the kind of steady gaze that suggested she'd seen every variation of family dysfunction humans could devise. Jessica arrived 10 minutes late, her pregnant belly prominent at 34 weeks now, wearing a flowing dress clearly chosen to emphasize her condition. Her attorney, David Park, was a young man who couldn't have been more than 5 years out of law school, and I wondered if she'd chosen him because he was affordable or because she thought a jury would sympathize with an underdog lawyer. My parents came separately with their own attorney, a middle-aged woman named Sharon Reeves, who had the tight smile of someone who knew her client's case was weak but was being paid to fight anyway. Dave wasn't present, having been formally removed as a defendant the week before in exchange for his cooperation agreement. Janet Torres arranged us around the oval conference table with practiced efficiency, positioning herself at the head with Sarah and Patricia on her right, Jessica and her attorney on her left, and my parents with their lawyer at the far end. "Before we begin," Janet said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to controlling contentious rooms, "I want to remind everyone that mediation is confidential. Nothing said here can be used in court if we don't reach a settlement. My role is to help you find common ground, not to judge who's right or wrong. However, I will review the evidence both sides have provided and give you my honest assessment of how a judge might view your positions." She pulled out 2 thick folders, one from each side, though ours was significantly thicker. I watched her spend 20 minutes reading in silence, her expression neutral at first, but gradually shifting to something harder as she worked through the surveillance photos, the text message screenshots, the certified mail receipts, the security camera transcripts. She paused particularly long on Dave's affidavit, reading it twice, and I saw Jessica's jaw tighten when Janet made a note in the margin. Finally, Janet set down her pen and looked directly at Jessica. "Ms. Martinez, I'll be frank with you. Based on the evidence I've reviewed, your position is extremely weak. The plaintiff has documented proof that you were served with a proper 30-day notice that you refused to vacate, and that your claims about medical necessity for staying in the home are contradicted by surveillance showing you engaging in activities inconsistent with strict bed rest. She tapped the folder. Photos of you at yoga classes, spas, shopping centers. Your own doctor's records, which were subpoenaed, show no bed rest order was ever issued. You have no written lease, no rental agreement, no legal basis to remain in someone else's property against their clearly stated wishes. Jessica leaned forward, her hand protectively on her belly. I'm 8 months pregnant. What judge is going to side with someone trying to make a pregnant woman homeless? A judge who sees evidence of fraud and manipulation, Janet replied coolly. This isn't about pregnancy, Ms. Martinez. This is about your refusal to honor a legal eviction notice and your apparent scheme to fraudulently obtain property and money from your sister. She turned to my parents. And Mr. and Mrs. Chen, your involvement in the planning stages combined with your financial situation suggests you were motivated by personal debt to assist in this scheme. My mother's face flushed. We were just trying to help our daughter. That's not a crime. Conspiracy to commit fraud is actually, Janet said. Though this is a civil case, not criminal, yet. She let that word hang in the air before turning to Patricia. What is your client seeking? Patricia glanced at me and I nodded. We'd discussed this carefully, knowing that a settlement offer during mediation could be used to show good faith, even if rejected. My client is willing to settle for $35,000 in damages to be paid within 90 days, plus immediate vacation of the property within 7 days of signing the settlement agreement. In exchange, we'll drop the harassment and emotional distress claims and agree not to pursue criminal fraud charges related to the forged documents. Jessica's attorney straightened in his chair. Forged documents. What are you talking about? Patricia pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across to Janet. 3 weeks ago, we sent the property transfer document found in Ms. Chen's home to a certified handwriting analyst. The signature purporting to be my client's is a forgery. We have the expert's report here, and he's prepared to testify that the signature was traced or copied but definitely not written by Sarah Chen. I watched the color drain from Jessica's face as Janet examined the handwriting analysis report. The analyst, a former FBI document examiner named Robert Tianzhong, had compared the signature on the transfer document to my genuine signatures from bank records, legal documents, and personal correspondence. His report was definitive. The pressure points were wrong, the flow was hesitant in ways genuine signatures never were, and microscopic examination showed evidence of pencil tracing that had been imperfectly erased before the ink signature was added. This is ridiculous, Jessica said, but her voice lacked conviction. I never forged anything. Then who did? Patricia asked mildly. The document was found in your possession in Ms. Chen's home where you were staying. It purports to transfer property into a family LLC that would give you control. Either you forged it or you commissioned someone else to forge it, both of which are criminal acts. David Park was flipping through the handwriting report, his expression increasingly grim. He leaned close to Jessica and whispered urgently. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see her shaking her head stubbornly, her jaw set in the same defiant expression she'd worn when refusing to leave my house. Janet Torres closed her folders and folded her hands on the table. Ms. Martinez, I'm going to give you my professional opinion based on 30 years in family law. If this case goes to trial, you will lose. The evidence against you is overwhelming. The plaintiff is offering you a settlement that, while significant, is far less than what a judge could award given the severity of the fraud allegations. I strongly advise you to accept this offer. $35,000. Jessica's voice rose. Where am I supposed to get that kind of money? That's not the mediator's concern, Patricia said. You can arrange a payment plan, you can borrow it, you can sell assets, but that's our offer. Take it or go to trial. Sharon Reeves. My parents' attorney cleared her throat. What about our clients? Are they included in this settlement offer? If all defendants agree to the terms and payment, yes, Patricia said. Everyone pays their share, everyone vacates, everyone signs a non-disclosure agreement, and we all move on. My mother was crying quietly. My father's face was stone. Jessica stared at the table, her hands clenched. Finally, she looked up and I saw something dangerous flash in her eyes. No, we're not settling. We're going to trial. David Park started to object. Jessica, I really think we should. I said no. She cut him off. I'm not giving her a penny. We're going to trial, and when the judge sees a wealthy cold woman trying to throw her pregnant sister onto the street, we're going to win. Juries love underdog stories, and that's what we are. This is a bench trial, Ms. Martinez, Janet interjected. There is no jury for civil cases under $50,000. It's just a judge reviewing evidence. Jessica's confidence didn't waver. Then the judge will see the truth. That I'm a mother who needed help and got betrayed by my own sister. We're going to trial. Janet looked at me, a question in her eyes. I could have pushed harder, could have urged Jessica to reconsider, but I'd come this far wanting exactly this outcome. Then we'll see you in court, I said quietly. The mediation ended at 4:30. Patricia and I gathered our materials in silence, while Jessica and her attorney argued in fierce whispers. My parents left without speaking to anyone. In the parking lot, Patricia turned to me with something like admiration. You knew she'd refuse. I did, I admitted. Jessica's never faced real consequences in her life. She genuinely believes she's entitled to win because she's always gotten her way before. She can't imagine a world where that stops being true. Well, Patricia said, unlocking her car. She's about to discover that world. Trial is set for June 12th. Let's make sure it's a lesson she never forgets. The morning of June 12th arrived with unseasonably cold weather for the Bay Area, gray clouds hanging low over the Santa Clara County Superior Courthouse. I'd barely slept the night before, running through potential questions in my mind, rehearsing the calm demeanor Patricia had coached me to maintain. When I arrived at 8:30, she was already there in the hallway outside courtroom 7, reviewing notes on her tablet with the focused intensity I'd come to recognize as her trial mode. Ready? She asked, looking up as I approached. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. Through the courtroom doors, I could see the space slowly filling with people. Ruth was there sitting in the gallery section as my witness and supporter. A few neighbors I recognized had come as well, curious or supportive, or both. Jessica arrived moments later with David Park, her pregnancy now impossible to ignore at 37 weeks. She wore a soft pink maternity dress and moved with the careful waddle of someone in the final stretch, and I knew the optics were deliberate. My parents came separately, looking smaller, somehow diminished by the formality of the legal proceedings they'd never imagined would actually happen. At precisely 9 o'clock, the bailiff called for everyone to rise. Judge Maria Hernandez entered from her chambers, her black robes crisp, her expression utterly neutral. She was a woman in her late 50s with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and the kind of face that gave nothing away. I'd researched her background obsessively over the past weeks. 23 years on the bench, known for being fair but demanding, intolerant of dishonesty, with a particular reputation for cutting through emotional manipulation to focus on facts and evidence. Please be seated, Judge Hernandez said, settling into her chair and opening the case file before her. We're here today for Chen versus Martinez, case number 25 CV 038471. This is a bench trial, which means I will be evaluating the evidence and rendering a verdict. There is no jury. Counselors, are you ready to proceed with opening statements? Patricia stood smoothing her suit jacket. Yes, Your Honor, the plaintiff is ready. Your Honor, the defense is ready as well, David Park said, though his voice carried less confidence than his words suggested. Judge Hernandez gestured to Patricia. Plaintiff may proceed. Patricia walked to the podium positioned between our table and the judge's bench, carrying a tablet and a laser pointer. A screen had been set up to one side of the courtroom for presenting evidence. Your Honor, this case is about a pattern of manipulation and exploitation that spans 15 years and culminated in an elaborate scheme to defraud my client of her home and her financial security. The defendants orchestrated a conspiracy that involved fake medical emergencies, forged documents, and deliberate violations of property rights. She clicked her tablet, and the screen illuminated with a timeline starting at the year 2010 and running through the present. Sarah Chen was 23 years old when she first sacrificed her future for her family. Patricia continued using the laser pointer to highlight the first entry on the timeline. She gave up a full scholarship to Columbia University's MBA program so her parents could afford private tutoring for the defendant Jessica Martinez. At age 27, she declined a promotion that would have taken her to New York because her sister was getting married. At age 32, she ended a relationship with a man who proposed marriage because her family needed her to stay local. Each sacrifice appeared on the timeline as Patricia spoke, building a visual representation of my disappeared life. This pattern continued for 15 years, with Sarah consistently putting her family's needs above her own aspirations, always believing that family meant sacrifice and love meant erasure of self. Patricia advanced to the next slide, showing my grandmother's house. 2 years ago, Sarah's grandmother Mei Chen passed away and left her villa solely to Sarah. Not to the family, not to be divided. Solely to Sarah, with legal protections specifically designed to prevent what the defendants attempted to do. Mei Chen knew her family, Your Honor. She knew they had taken advantage of Sarah for years, and she gave Sarah something they couldn't manipulate away. Or so she thought. The next slide showed the Christmas night security camera timestamp. On December 25, 2024, Sarah overheard the defendants planning to take her home through a combination of emotional manipulation, fraudulent investment schemes, and illegal property transfer. We have video and audio evidence of this conversation, which we will present today. David Park was making notes furiously, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. He'd seen all this evidence in discovery, but hearing Patricia lay it out as a cohesive narrative in front of a judge made it impossible to dismiss. Patricia spent the next 10 minutes outlining each element of the case, methodically building the framework she would prove with evidence. She described the fake investment scheme with its hidden collateral clause, the manufactured medical emergency, the refusal to honor the eviction notice, and the forged property transfer document. The defendants believed Sarah would never stand up to them because she never had before. They were wrong. We will show Your Honor that every element of fraud, trespass, and intentional infliction of emotional distress can be proven beyond any reasonable doubt. Thank you. David Park's opening was shorter and focused almost entirely on emotion. He spoke about Jessica's pregnancy, the difficulty of raising 3 children, the importance of families supporting each other in times of need. He characterized the lawsuit as vindictive and cruel, suggesting that Sarah had always resented her sister and was using this situation to punish her family for perceived childhood slights. My client made mistakes in judgment, he concluded, but her intentions were never malicious. She simply needed help, and she turned to the person who should have been there for her sister. Judge Hernandez's expression hadn't changed throughout either opening statement. Call your first witness, she instructed Patricia. The plaintiff calls Sarah Chen to the stand. I walked to the witness box on legs that felt disconnected from my body, raised my right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Patricia guided me through the preliminary questions, establishing my background, my relationship to the defendants, my ownership of the villa. Then she turned to the night that had started everything. Ms. Chen, please tell the court what happened on Christmas night. I took a breath and began describing the evening, Emma's warning note, my decision to stand outside the office door and listen. Patricia introduced the security camera footage as Exhibit A, and the courtroom fell silent as the video played. The audio quality was crystal clear, every word of Jessica's plan audible to everyone in the room. I watched Judge Hernandez's face as she listened, saw her eyes narrow slightly when Jessica's voice said, "She'll have no choice," and again when my mother mentioned their debt. When the video ended, Patricia asked me to explain my reaction. I realized that everything I'd given up, all the years of putting them first, meant nothing to them. I was just a resource to be exploited. So I decided to document everything and protect what my grandmother had protected for me. Patricia introduced my journals. Next, exhibits B through P15 leather-bound books, spanning 15 years. She asked me to read selected passages aloud, and my voice remained steady as I shared the private pain I'd written to myself over the years. The Columbia entry, the broken engagement, the missed promotion, each one a small death of possibility, and Judge Hernandez took notes throughout. The PI photographs came next. Exhibit Q, a series of images showing Jessica at yoga at spas carrying children and shopping bags during the weeks she claimed to need strict bed rest. Patricia displayed them on the screen one by one, each timestamp clearly visible, each location identified. Ms. Chen, did your sister appear to have any physical limitations during the time she was living in your home? No, I said. She moved freely, carried her children, went out regularly. The only time she appeared weak or in distress was when she wanted something from me. David Park objected twice during my testimony, once claiming the journals were hearsay and once suggesting the PI photos violated Jessica's privacy. But Judge Hernandez overruled both times with curt explanations about documentation and public photography. By the time Patricia finished with me, 2 hours had passed, and the foundation of the case was laid in evidence that couldn't be disputed or explained away. Jessica was crying quietly at the defense table, but Judge Hernandez didn't look at her with sympathy. She was looking at the timeline still displayed on the screen, at the pattern of exploitation that had finally found its ending. After my testimony concluded, Judge Hernandez called for a 15-minute recess. I sat in the hallway with Patricia drinking water from a paper cup and trying to process the surreal experience of having laid my entire history bare in a courtroom. When we returned, David Park stood and announced that the defense would call Jessica Martinez to the stand. I watched my sister rise from her seat, one hand supporting her lower back in a gesture of pregnancy discomfort that might have been genuine or might have been performance. At this point, I could no longer tell the difference. The bailiff swore her in, and Jessica settled into the witness chair with visible effort, arranging her dress carefully and placing both hands on her belly in a protective pose. David Park approached with a gentle expression, clearly hoping to establish her as a sympathetic figure before Patricia could dismantle her story. Ms. Martinez, can you tell the court about your relationship with your sister Sarah? Jessica's voice was soft, almost tremulous. We've always been close. She's my big sister, the person I looked up to my whole life. She was always so smart and capable, and I admired that about her. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. That's why it hurt so much when she turned on me like this. Can you describe the circumstances that led to you staying at your sister's home? Of course. Jessica shifted in her seat. I'm pregnant with my 4th child, and during a routine checkup in early January, my doctor became very concerned about my blood pressure. She told me I was at serious risk for preeclampsia and that I needed to be on strict bed rest immediately. I was terrified. I have 3 young children already, and my husband works long hours. Our house has stairs which would be impossible for someone on bed rest. I called Sarah because she has that beautiful first-floor bedroom in her villa, and I thought family helps family, right? She agreed to let us stay temporarily just until the baby was born, and I recovered. Did you intend to stay permanently? Absolutely not. Jessica's voice carried conviction that would have sounded genuine if I hadn't heard the Christmas conversation myself. It was always meant to be temporary, a few months at most. I even wrote her a thank you note saying we'd stay for a while, meaning a short period. I never imagined she'd turn around and sue me for accepting the help she offered. What about the investment your husband proposed? That was completely separate, Jessica said quickly. Dave has been working so hard on his technology startup, and we thought it would be nice to include Sarah as an investor, a way to bring her into our success. The business plan was professional and legitimate. We weren't trying to trick anyone. David Park nodded sympathetically. And how has this lawsuit affected you? Jessica's tears began in earnest now. It's been devastating. The stress has been terrible for my pregnancy. I'm terrified I'm going to lose this baby because of the anxiety. My children are confused and scared. They love their Aunt Sarah and they can't understand why she's doing this to us. I feel betrayed by the one person who should have protected me." "Thank you, Ms. Martinez," David Park said, returning to his seat, with the satisfied expression of someone who believed he'd successfully humanized his client. Judge Hernandez looked to Patricia. "Cross-examination." Patricia stood, and I recognized the controlled intensity in her posture. This was the moment she'd been preparing for. "Ms. Martinez, you testified that your doctor ordered strict bed rest in early January. Which doctor was that?" "Dr. Miranda Lopez at Bay Area Women's Health." "And Dr. Lopez specifically used the words strict bed rest." Jessica hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "Yes, she was very clear about it." Patricia pulled out a document. "Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Exhibit R, the medical records from Bay Area Women's Health for Jessica Martinez, which were obtained through proper subpoena." She handed copies to the judge and to David Park, whose face paled as he scanned the pages. "Ms. Martinez, these are your prenatal visit notes from Dr. Lopez. Can you point to where it mentions bed rest?" Jessica took the papers with shaking hands, flipping through pages. It might not be written down. She told me verbally." "Doctors document all medical orders, Ms. Martinez. It's required for insurance and liability purposes. There is no mention of bed rest anywhere in your records, is there?" "She must have forgotten to write it down." "Or she never ordered it at all," Patricia said calmly. "In fact, according to these notes, Dr. Lopez wrote on January 8th that your pregnancy is progressing normally and that you should continue regular moderate activity. Does that sound like strict bed rest to you?" Jessica's jaw tightened. My blood pressure was high. "According to these same records, your blood pressure at every appointment has been within normal range for pregnancy. 120/78, 118/75, all perfectly healthy numbers." Patricia advanced another exhibit. "Let's talk about what you were doing during this period of alleged strict bed rest. Do you recognize this photo?" The screen displayed Jessica in full yoga pose, clearly mid-class. The timestamp read January 27th. I was doing gentle prenatal yoga. The doctor said light exercise was okay." "This is from Prenatal Power Yoga, a high-intensity class. The instructor we interviewed described it as vigorous vinyasa flow." "Is that gentle?" Patricia clicked to the next image, Jessica emerging from a spa with wet hair and a relaxed expression. "What about this 2-hour spa session, including hot stone massage? Is that strict bed rest?" I needed to relax for my health. And this. Another photo, Jessica carrying Madison on one hip while holding shopping bags in the other hand. Carrying a 30-pound child while shopping at Target. Still bed rest. Jessica's composure was cracking. "You had someone following me. That's disgusting." "It's legal investigation of fraudulent claims, Ms. Martinez. You told my client you couldn't go home because of stairs, that you were too weak to function. But these photos show you engaging in strenuous physical activity throughout the entire time you claim to be bedridden. Which version is the truth?" "I was trying my best. Being pregnant is hard." "I'm sure it is," Patricia said, her tone sharpening. "But being pregnant and needing bed rest are two different things. You lied about your medical condition to manipulate your sister into housing you, didn't you? I needed help. Then why not ask honestly?" Patricia retrieved the Christmas video exhibit. "Let's watch something together, shall we?" She played a section of the Christmas conversation, Jessica's voice clear and calculating. "Once we're in, we'll refinance under the family LLC. She'll have no choice." The courtroom was utterly silent as the video played. Jessica stared at the screen, her face drained of color. "Does that sound like someone who just needed temporary help?" Patricia asked. "Or does that sound like someone executing a plan to steal property? That's taken out of context. The context is you conspiring with your parents to defraud your sister. There's no other interpretation." Patricia paused, letting the weight of the evidence settle. "Ms. Martinez, in your direct testimony, you talked about how much you admired Sarah, how close you were. Let me ask you something. In the 15 years covered by Sarah's journals, can you name one time you sacrificed something meaningful for her? Jessica opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hands gripped the arms of the witness chair. One time you put her needs above your own, Patricia continued. One opportunity you gave up so she could succeed. One relationship you supported instead of undermining. One moment where you treated her with the same consideration she's shown you for your entire adult life. Can you name even one? Jessica's voice broke. We're family. It's different. She's older. She's always been the strong one. She's supposed to help. That's not an answer, Ms. Martinez. The question was simple. Name one sacrifice. Tears were streaming down Jessica's face now, but they looked different from the calculated tears she'd deployed earlier. These looked like the tears of someone confronting an unbearable truth. I can't, she whispered. I can't think of one. Because there isn't one, is there? For 15 years you took and took and took, and when she finally had something, you couldn't manipulate her into giving you tried to steal it. That's what this case is really about. David Park was on his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is badgering the witness. Judge Hernandez's voice cut through the tension. Overruled. The witness will answer questions put to her. She looked at Jessica with an expression that held no sympathy. Ms. Martinez, you may step down. Jessica practically fled the witness stand, sobbing openly, and I felt no triumph in her breakdown. Just a hollow sadness that it had taken a courtroom and a judge to force her to see what she'd been doing all along. Jessica returned to the defense table looking shattered, and David Park leaned close to whisper urgently while she wiped her face with tissues that were already sodden. I could see him trying to regroup to salvage what remained of their case, but the momentum had shifted irrevocably. Judge Hernandez gave them a moment before looking to Patricia with an expectant expression. The plaintiff calls Dr. Miranda Lopez to the stand. A woman in her mid-40s entered the courtroom wearing professional attire, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, carrying herself with the calm authority of someone who spent her days delivering both good news and bad with equal composure. She was sworn in and stated her credentials for the record 15 years, as a board-certified obstetrician-gynecologist currently practicing at Bay Area Women's Health, specializing in high-risk pregnancies. Patricia established the foundation quickly. Dr. Lopez, is Jessica Martinez your patient? Yes, she's been under my care for this pregnancy since August of last year, and I delivered her previous 3 children as well. During this current pregnancy, have you at any time ordered Ms. Martinez to be on bed rest? Dr. Lopez's answer was unequivocal. No, I have not. Have you diagnosed her with any high-risk conditions that would necessitate bed rest or restricted activity? No, her pregnancy has been textbook normal. Blood pressure consistently within healthy range, no signs of preeclampsia, no gestational diabetes, no placental issues. She's actually been one of my healthier patients this year. Patricia introduced the medical records as evidence, and Dr. Lopez walked the judge through each prenatal visit, explaining the notations and measurements. Every single entry contradicted Jessica's claims. On January 8th, when Ms. Martinez alleges, I ordered strict bed rest. I actually noted here that she should continue her normal activities, including moderate exercise. I specifically recommended prenatal yoga because she mentioned feeling stiff. Is it possible you ordered bed rest verbally and simply forgot to document it? Dr. Lopez's expression made clear how absurd she found that suggestion. Absolutely not. Bed rest is a significant medical intervention with insurance implications, liability considerations, and required follow-up monitoring. Every bed rest order I've ever written has been thoroughly documented with specific restrictions, duration, and the medical reasoning. There would be notes in the chart, a printed order for the patient, and typically coordination with her insurance company. None of that exists for Ms. Martinez because I never ordered it. Patricia showed Dr. Lopez the surveillance photos of Jessica at yoga at the spa carrying children. In your medical opinion, would these activities be consistent with a patient who required strict bed rest? Not even remotely. If a patient truly needed strict bed rest, these activities would be explicitly prohibited. Hot stone massage, for instance, can raise core body temperature, which we avoid in pregnancy. High-intensity yoga could elevate heart rate and blood pressure. Carrying a 30-pound child puts strain on the back and abdomen. If I'd had medical concerns serious enough to order bed rest, I would have forbidden all of these activities. One final question, doctor. Did Ms. Martinez have any legitimate medical reason to move into her sister's home in January? None whatsoever. She's fully capable of independent living, managing stairs, caring for her children, and maintaining a normal household. The only medical restriction I've given her is to avoid alcohol and to take her prenatal vitamins. Dr. Lopez looked directly at Judge Hernandez. I've reviewed the allegations in this case, and I want to be absolutely clear. Ms. Martinez fabricated the medical emergency. There was no emergency. There was no bed rest order. She used my name and my practice to justify actions that had nothing to do with medical necessity. David Park declined to cross-examine a tacit admission that there was nothing he could ask that wouldn't make things worse. Dr. Lopez stepped down, and I saw Jessica slump further in her chair, the last pillar of her defense demolished by the very doctor she'd claimed was treating her. Patricia's next words sent a visible shock through Jessica. The plaintiff calls David Martinez to the stand. Dave entered from the hallway where he'd been waiting as a witness forbidden from hearing the other testimony. He looked thinner than I remembered, worn down by months of carrying secrets and lies. He was sworn in and took his seat, his eyes carefully avoiding Jessica's furious stare. Mr. Martinez, you were married to Jessica Martinez until recently, correct? Yes, we separated in March and the divorce was finalized last month. I have primary custody of our 3 children. Patricia guided him through the timeline methodically. When did you first become aware of your wife's plan regarding Sarah Chen's property? Last November, about 7 months ago. Jessica started talking about how Sarah had this big villa with just herself living there, how it was wasteful, how we could use that space. At first, I thought she just meant visiting more often, but then she started mapping out this whole strategy. Dave's voice was steady, but his hands gripped the armrests. She said we'd get pregnant to maximize sympathy, that she'd fake a medical condition to justify moving in, that we'd pressure Sarah into investing in a business so we could use her house as collateral. She had it all planned out months before Christmas. What about Sarah's parents? How were they involved? Jessica knew about their gambling debt. My mother-in-law has a serious problem with online poker and casino visits. They owed over $80,000 and were getting desperate. Jessica promised she'd pay off their debt if they helped pressure Sarah into the investment and the move-in. She told them exactly what to say on Christmas night. It was choreographed. Patricia introduced Dave's affidavit and the text messages he'd preserved. Can you tell the court about the property transfer document found in Ms. Chen's home? Dave's expression turned ashamed. I saw Jessica practicing copying Sarah's signature in early February. She had old birthday cards and Christmas cards, and she was tracing the signatures over and over. When I confronted her, she said she was just preparing paperwork that Sarah would sign eventually anyway, so it didn't matter. I knew it was wrong, but I was scared of her by that point. She'd threatened to take my kids if I didn't cooperate. Did you believe she would follow through with the investment scheme? Yes, because she told me what would happen after. She planned to take the money, divorce me, and keep primary custody of the kids. She said I was useless, and that once she had financial security from Sarah, she didn't need me anymore. His voice cracked slightly. I have text messages where she discussed this with a friend. She thought I didn't know, but I'd found them months ago. Patricia introduced the messages as evidence, and then she played the audio recording that Dave had made in December, the one he'd mentioned in his first email to me. The courtroom fell silent as Jessica's voice filled the space crystal clear and devoid of any ambiguity. Dave, just do what I say. Once we get the money from the investment and control of the house, you can have your little startup. Then I'm gone. I'll file for divorce, get primary custody because I always do, and I'll finally be free of you. Sarah's money will set me up for life. Dave's voice on the recording uncertain and pained. What about the kids? They'll be better off without you anyway. You're barely a father as it is. The recording ended, and the silence that followed felt suffocating. I glanced at Jessica and saw her face had gone gray, her earlier tears replaced by a kind of frozen horror as she realized the full scope of what had just been exposed. It wasn't just her conspiracy against me anymore. It was her cruelty toward her own husband, her casual willingness to destroy everyone around her to get what she wanted. Judge Hernandez was writing extensive notes, her expression harder than granite. David Park had his head in his hands, likely contemplating the ethical nightmare of continuing to represent a client whose malice had just been laid bare in her own recorded words. Dave finished his testimony by confirming the handwriting analysis, stating that he'd witnessed Jessica's attempts to forge my signature and had been too afraid to stop her. Patricia had no further questions, and David Park, looking defeated, waved off cross-examination entirely. As Dave stepped down, walking past Jessica without a glance, I understood that this wasn't just about winning a lawsuit anymore. This was about the complete unraveling of the life Jessica had built on manipulation and lies. Her marriage was destroyed. Her credibility was annihilated. Her conspiracy was exposed in excruciating detail. And we weren't even done yet. After Dave's testimony concluded, Judge Hernandez called for a 30-minute recess before closing arguments. I spent that time in the hallway bathroom splashing cold water on my face and trying to steady my breathing. The weight of what had been revealed in that courtroom felt crushing. This wasn't just about proving my case anymore. I'd watched my sister's entire facade crumble, watched her cruelty and calculation exposed in her own voice, and despite everything she'd done to me, seeing another human being so thoroughly destroyed was harder than I'd anticipated. When we reconvened, the courtroom felt heavier, the air thick with the knowledge that we were approaching the end. Judge Hernandez settled into her chair and looked to Patricia. "Closing arguments for the plaintiff." Patricia stood, and I could see she'd spent the recess organizing her thoughts into a devastating final summary. "Your Honor, over the past 2 days, we've presented overwhelming evidence of a coordinated conspiracy to defraud Sarah Chen of her property and her financial security. Let's review what the evidence has shown beyond any doubt." She counted on her fingers as she spoke. "First, we have video and audio evidence of the defendants planning this scheme on Christmas night. You heard Jessica Martinez's own words. Once we're in, we'll refinance under the family LLC. She'll have no choice." "That's not a family member asking for help. That's someone plotting theft." She advanced to her second point. "We have medical fraud. Dr. Lopez testified unequivocally that she never ordered bed rest, that Jessica Martinez's pregnancy is completely normal, and that there was no medical necessity whatsoever for moving into Sarah's home. Ms. Martinez fabricated a medical emergency to justify occupying the property. She then used that fabricated emergency to resist a legal eviction notice, claiming she was too ill to leave, when surveillance photos show her at spas, yoga classes, and shopping centers throughout the entire period she claimed to be bedridden. Patricia's voice grew sharper. "We have attempted document fraud. A handwriting expert confirmed that Sarah's signature on the property transfer document was forged. David Martinez testified that he witnessed Jessica practicing copying that signature. The defendants weren't just planning to manipulate Sarah emotionally. They were preparing to commit criminal fraud to steal her property legally." She paused, letting each point land. "We have the investment scheme, a fraudulent business plan designed to extract $500,000 from Sarah while using her own home as collateral without her knowledge. And we have the involvement of Robert and Linda Chen, who participated in this conspiracy in exchange for having their $80,000 gambling debt paid off. Every element of this case points to the same conclusion: the defendants engaged in a calculated, premeditated scheme to exploit Sarah's generosity and steal everything her grandmother tried to protect for her." Patricia returned to the podium, her final words measured and firm. "Sarah Chen spent 15 years sacrificing for a family that viewed her as a resource rather than a person. When her grandmother finally gave her something they couldn't manipulate away, they tried to take it through lies, fraud, and emotional coercion. Your Honor, We ask that you award Sarah full damages for her legal expenses, the emotional distress she has endured, and the cost of removing these defendants from her property. We ask for a restraining order to prevent further harassment, and we ask that you send a clear message that family does not give anyone the right to commit fraud." David Park's closing was brief and defeated. He acknowledged that mistakes had been made, asked the judge to consider Jessica's pregnancy and the impact on the children, and suggested that the situation had been blown out of proportion by misunderstandings rather than malice. Even he seemed to know his arguments were hollow against the mountain of evidence Patricia had presented. Judge Hernandez took only 10 minutes to review her notes before she was ready to render her verdict. Those 10 minutes felt like hours, the courtroom silent except for the scratch of her pen and the occasional rustle of paper. Finally, she looked up, her expression grave. "I've presided over family law cases for 23 years, she began, "and I have rarely seen such clear evidence of deliberate, calculated fraud. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a family dispute that got out of hand. This was a conspiracy involving multiple parties to defraud Ms. Chen of her property through lies, fabricated medical emergencies, and attempted forgery." She looked directly at Jessica. "Ms. Martinez, your testimony was contradicted by your own doctor, by surveillance evidence, by your husband, and by recordings of your own voice. You showed no remorse, only entitlement. You could not name a single sacrifice you made for the sister you claimed to love, because you have spent 15 years taking from her without ever giving anything in return." Judge Hernandez turned to my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen, you enabled this scheme for your own financial benefit, putting your gambling debts ahead of your daughter's well-being. That is a betrayal of the most fundamental parental duty." She referred to her notes. "I find in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. The defendants are jointly and severally liable for damages in the amount of $45,000 itemized as follows: $15,000 for legal fees and court costs, $8,000 for private investigation expenses, $7,000 for emotional distress and therapy costs, and $15,000 in punitive damages to deter this kind of conduct in the future. Payment is due within 90 days. My mother made a small sound of distress, and my father's face had gone ashen. $45,000 was more than they could possibly have, especially with their existing debt. "Furthermore," Judge Hernandez continued, "I am issuing a restraining order requiring all defendants to maintain a distance of at least 100 yards from Sarah Chen and her property. Jessica Martinez and her children must vacate the premises at 847 Sycamore Lane within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in forcible eviction by the Sheriff's Department and potential contempt charges." She closed her folder with finality. "This court is adjourned." The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Jessica made a horrible gasping sound, her hand flying to her belly. "Oh, God!" she moaned, her face contorting in pain. "Something's wrong." David Park was on his feet immediately. "She needs an ambulance." The bailiff called for emergency services while Jessica doubled over, her breathing rapid and shallow. My mother rushed to her side, crying Jessica's name, while my father stood frozen in apparent shock. I felt Patricia's hand on my arm, steadying me as we watched the chaos unfold. "Is it the baby?" my mother was asking frantically. "Jessica, is it the baby? Contractions?" Jessica gasped between breaths. "They're coming fast. Oh God, it hurts." The paramedics arrived within minutes, efficiently loading Jessica onto a stretcher while taking her vital signs and asking rapid-fire questions about her due date and medical history. She was 3 weeks early, they noted, but within the range of normal. The stress of the verdict had likely triggered labor. As they wheeled her toward the exit, Jessica's eyes found mine across the courtroom. For just a moment, all the anger and manipulation fell away, and I saw genuine fear there. She was about to give birth, and she'd just lost everything else. "Sarah?" She called out, her voice breaking. "Please, I'm sorry. Please." I didn't respond. I just watched as they took her away, my mother following behind the stretcher, still crying, my father trailing after them, looking 20 years older than he had that morning. Ruth appeared at my side, having witnessed everything from the gallery. "Are you all right, dear?" I nodded slowly, though I wasn't sure it was true. "She's going to have her baby tonight." "Yes," Ruth said gently. "And you're going to have your home back. Those are separate things, Sarah. You didn't cause this. She did." Patricia was gathering her materials, professional satisfaction evident in her posture. "Congratulations," she said to me. "You won, completely and decisively." But standing in that empty courtroom listening to the echo of Jessica's apology still hanging in the air, victory felt more complicated than I'd imagined it would. Jessica gave birth to a healthy baby girl that night at 9:17 p.m. I know because my mother texted me a photo at 9:45, the message containing just the image and no words. A wrinkled newborn with a shock of dark hair wrapped in a hospital blanket, Jessica's exhausted face barely visible in the background. I stared at that photo for a long time, feeling the complicated tangle of emotions that comes from knowing your niece entered the world on the same day her mother's lies were destroyed in court. I didn't reply to the text. The 72-hour eviction deadline Judge Hernandez had imposed meant Jessica had until Monday at noon to remove herself and her belongings from my villa. The movers arrived Sunday afternoon, the same company that had brought her possessions in with such confidence 3 months earlier. This time they worked in grim silence, loading boxes and furniture, while Jessica sat in the living room nursing her newborn, her face blank with what I recognized as shock. She didn't speak to me once during the entire process. Emma helped her younger siblings pack their things, and when the girl paused at my office door to whisper, "I'm sorry, Aunt Sarah," I pulled her into a hug and told her none of this was her fault. By Sunday evening, my house was mine again. The sudden quiet felt disorienting after months of children's voices and Jessica's constant presence. I walked through each room, opening windows to let in fresh air, already planning how I'd reclaim the spaces that had been occupied. But the peace I'd fought for felt fragile, temporary, like waiting for the next storm. It arrived on Wednesday afternoon. I was working in my home office when the doorbell rang insistently, someone pressing it over and over in a pattern that suggested panic or desperation. Through the window, I saw my parents' car in the driveway, both of them standing on my front porch. My father was holding what looked like financial documents, and my mother's face was blotchy with recent crying. I considered not answering, but something made me open the door. "Sarah, please, we need to talk," my father said immediately, his voice carrying none of its usual authority. "Can we come in?" "We can talk here." I stepped onto the porch, leaving the door mostly closed behind me. I was aware of Ruth working in her garden next door, carefully not looking in our direction, but absolutely listening. My mother's composure cracked immediately. "We can't pay the $45,000. We don't have it. We've been to 3 banks and they all denied us for a loan because of our existing debt. We've looked into second mortgages, personal loans, everything. We have nowhere to turn." She was wringing her hands, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when she wanted something. "You have to give us more time, or reduce the amount. We're your parents, Sarah. You can't do this to us." "The judge determined the amount based on actual damages," I said quietly. "I didn't choose that number. The court did." My father's face flushed with anger or shame, I couldn't tell which. "We raised you. We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head for 18 years. Doesn't that count for something?" "You did the bare minimum required of parents," I replied and watched him flinch. "And then you tried to steal from me. Those 2 things don't cancel each other out." "Please." My mother's voice broke on the word, and then, to my absolute shock, she sank to her knees on my porch. "Please, Sarah. We're begging you. We'll lose everything. The house, our savings, everything. Have mercy." My father hesitated for only a moment before joining her, both of my parents kneeling on the concrete step, while Ruth's pruning shears went still, and I heard the distinct click of a phone camera from somewhere across the street. Mrs. Kowalski from 3 houses down was recording this, I realized, with a sick feeling. "Get up," I said, my voice sharp with embarrassment and something that might have been pity. "Both of you stand up right now." Not until you agree to help us. My mother said, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying. We need a payment plan, something we can actually manage. Please, Sarah. We're your parents. I looked at them. These people who'd spent my entire life teaching me that family meant sacrifice, that love meant erasing myself, that their needs would always matter more than mine. And here they were on their knees, still asking me to save them from the consequences of their own choices. I'll offer you one option, I said finally. $500 a month for 7 years. That's $42,000 total, $3,000 less than the judgment. But there are conditions. My father's head snapped up. What conditions? You both attend family therapy. Weekly sessions with a licensed therapist who specializes in gambling addiction and family dysfunction. You complete a financial management course, and you have no contact with me outside of written updates through my attorney until the debt is paid in full and the therapy is complete. Therapy. My mother's voice dripped with disdain. We don't need therapy. We need money. Those are my terms. Take them, or the full $45,000 is due in 87 days, and when you can't pay, the court will garnish your wages and potentially force the sale of your house. My father struggled to his feet, helping my mother up with him. His face had hardened into the expression I knew from childhood, the one that appeared when he didn't get his way. You're punishing us. This isn't about the money at all. You want to humiliate us, make us grovel. I want you to get help, I said, and I meant it. Mom's gambling addiction destroyed your finances and helped push you into conspiracy. You both need to understand why you thought it was acceptable to try to steal from your own daughter. Therapy might help you see that. We're not going to therapy like we're broken, my mother said, her tears turning to anger. And we're certainly not going to spend 7 years under your thumb reporting to you like children. We'll find another way. Then find it, I said. You have 87 days. They left without another word, and I watched their car pull away before I noticed the small crowd that had gathered. Mrs. Kowalski was still recording. The Tanaka family from across the street stood in their driveway, making no pretense of not watching. Ruth had abandoned her gardening entirely and was standing at the property line, her expression a mixture of satisfaction and concern. That took courage, Ruth said as I walked over to her fence. It felt cruel, I admitted. Consequences often do, especially to people who've never faced them before. She glanced toward where my parents' car had disappeared. Mrs. Kowalski is going to post that video everywhere you know. The neighborhood Facebook group, probably Twitter. Your parents kneeling on your doorstep will be all over social media by tonight. She was right. By 8 p.m., my phone was buzzing with notifications from people I hadn't spoken to in years. The video had spread beyond the neighborhood, picked up by local drama pages and community groups with captions like "Family Drama in Willow Glen" and "Parents who tried to steal daughter's house forced to beg." The footage was grainy but clear enough to show my mother on her knees, my father joining her, and my face tight with discomfort as I refused their pleas. The comments were vicious. Some people praised me for standing firm. Others called me heartless for recording my parents' humiliation, though I hadn't been the one with the camera. A few people who knew Jessica chimed in with their own stories of her manipulation, adding fuel to a fire I'd never intended to start. I turned my phone off at 10 and sat in the quiet of my reclaimed home, thinking about how victory was supposed to feel different from this. I'd won in court. I'd protected my property. I'd enforced boundaries that were 15 years overdue. But watching my parents kneel and beg, knowing that video would follow them for years, seeing my family's dysfunction become entertainment for strangers on the internet, none of that felt like winning. It just felt like the necessary ending to something that should never have begun. The social reckoning began at church that Sunday. I didn't attend myself. I'd stopped going regularly years ago, but Ruth did, and she came to my house that afternoon with a troubled expression and a plate of cookies she'd clearly baked as an excuse to visit. "You need to know what happened this morning," she said as I let her in. "Your parents were there sitting in their usual pew When Pastor David asked for community prayer requests during the service, Linda stood up and asked everyone to pray for their family during this difficult time of estrangement. Ruth set the cookies on my kitchen counter with more force than necessary. She made it sound like you'd abandoned them for no reason. But here's the thing, half the congregation was already whispering because they'd seen the video or heard about the trial. Mary Chen, your father's cousin, she stood up right there in the middle of the service and said, "Maybe we should pray that you stop lying to this church about why your daughter won't speak to you." I sank into a kitchen chair imagining the scene. What did my mother do? Walked out. Your father followed. But the damage was done. After the service, I heard at least a dozen conversations about the court case, the conspiracy, the fake medical emergency. Someone had pulled up the local court records on their phone and was showing people the actual judgment. Your mother's gambling problem is now common knowledge among every church lady in Santa Clara County. The rupture spread through their social circles like a fracture line through ice. My parents had been part of that church for 30 years, had served on committees, had hosted Bible study groups in their home. Within a week, those invitations stopped coming. Ruth reported that the Church Ladies Book Club had quietly removed my mother from the group chat. The men's golf group that my father played with every Thursday suddenly had scheduling conflicts that prevented him from joining. These weren't dramatic confrontations or public denouncements, just the quiet social death that happens when a community decides you've violated its unspoken rules. The neighborhood wasn't much kinder, Mrs. Kowalski's video had been shared thousands of times across local social media, and suddenly, everyone had an opinion. The neighborhood Facebook group, usually reserved for lost pet notices and recommendations for plumbers, exploded with debate. Some people defended my parents, saying family should forgive family, that I was cruel for enforcing the judgment so harshly. But more people shared their own stories of my parents' behavior over the years, small incidents that formed a pattern I'd never seen from the outside. The Johnsons mentioned how my mother had spread rumors about their daughter's divorce. The Patels described my father's barely concealed racism during a homeowners association meeting. The accumulated weight of 30 years of minor cruelties came pouring out, and my parents found themselves reassessed by people who'd tolerated them out of politeness rather than genuine affection. Jessica's social collapse was even more spectacular. She'd always had a wide circle of friends, other mothers she'd met through playgroups and school activities, women who sympathized with the challenges of raising multiple children. But those friendships had been built on a carefully curated image of Jessica as a struggling but devoted mother, doing her best in difficult circumstances. The trial had shattered that image completely. I learned through Ruth's network of neighborhood informants that Jessica's closest friend, a woman named Melanie who'd been in her book club for 5 years, had confronted her after reading the court transcripts that were now publicly available online. She asked Jessica directly if the bed rest was fake, Ruth told me during one of her updates. Jessica apparently tried to explain it away, said the court didn't understand the nuances, that it was more complicated than the judge made it sound. Melanie told her she was done being lied to and blocked her on everything. The pattern repeated itself across Jessica's social network. Lunch dates got canceled. Group texts went silent when she posted. The mothers who'd once traded babysitting and carpooling favors found sudden reasons why they couldn't help anymore. I felt a complicated mixture of satisfaction and guilt about this. Jessica had manipulated people for years, and they were finally seeing her clearly. But I also knew that social isolation, especially for a new mother, could be devastating. The impact on the children was hardest to stomach. Emma was 12 now, old enough to understand what had happened and to feel the repercussions at school. She sent me a text message one evening. She still had my number, and I'd made clear she was always welcome to contact me, that said simply, "Kids at school are asking if my mom tried to steal from you. I don't know what to say." I called her instead of texting back, and we talked for nearly an hour about how to handle questions she didn't have answers for, about how none of this was her fault, about how complicated families could be. I could hear the loneliness in her voice, the weight of carrying her mother's shame while trying to protect her younger siblings from understanding too much. Tyler and Madison were younger but not immune. Their teachers reported to Dave, who now had primary custody, that other children had started avoiding them at recess, parroting things they'd heard their parents say at home about that family who tried to steal a house. Dave was doing his best to shield them, had even considered switching schools, but the story had spread too widely for a fresh start to be simple. The local news coverage brought everything to a new level of public scrutiny. A reporter from the San Jose Mercury News had noticed the court case in public records and recognized it as the kind of human interest story that would generate clicks and conversation. The article appeared online first on a Thursday morning with the headline, "Family Betrayal, Bay Area Woman Sues Parents and Sister Over Inheritance Scheme." The reporter had done thorough research interviewing neighbors, including Ruth, reviewing court documents, and even finding my old boss who confirmed I'd turned down the New York promotion years ago. The article was surprisingly balanced, presenting both the facts of the case and the human tragedy underneath. It included a statement from Patricia about the importance of protecting property rights even within families, and a brief comment from David Park about how the situation had been a painful misunderstanding that unfortunately escalated. Jessica had refused to be interviewed, but her silence was noted in the piece. The article ended with a quote from a family law professor at Stanford discussing the rising trend of elder financial abuse and inheritance disputes, contextualizing our private disaster within broader societal patterns. Within 24 hours, the article had been picked up by the local television news. I came home one evening to find a reporter and cameraman on my doorstep asking if I'd be willing to share my side of the story. I declined politely but firmly, and they settled for filming B-roll of my villa and interviewing neighbors who were more than happy to talk. That night, my family's dysfunction was the third story on the 6 o'clock news, complete with dramatic reenactment graphics and commentary from legal experts. My phone rang constantly with calls from people I hadn't heard from in years, some offering support, others fishing for details they could share as gossip. I stopped answering numbers I didn't recognize and let most calls go to voicemail. The attention felt violating, like having my wounds examined by strangers who claimed concern but were really just curious about the spectacle. Through it all, I stayed in my villa, working from home, venturing out only for necessities. Ruth brought me groceries twice to save me from the stares at the supermarket. Patricia fielded media requests and sent me a cease and desist letter to use if reporters wouldn't leave me alone. And I tried to reconcile the person I'd been, the quiet, accommodating sister who never made waves, with the person I'd become, someone whose family's destruction was public entertainment. The gossip would eventually die down, I knew. Some other scandal would capture the neighborhood's attention, some other family's private pain would become the next viral story. But the consequences of what had been revealed would linger far longer than the news cycle, changing irrevocably how everyone saw my family, how they saw me, and how we'd all have to learn to exist in a community that now knew all our secrets. The divorce proceedings happened faster than I expected. Dave had filed the initial paperwork even before the trial concluded, but the process accelerated dramatically once Judge Hernandez's verdict became part of the public record. His attorney used the trial transcripts as evidence in the custody hearing, arguing that Jessica's demonstrated pattern of lying, manipulation, and fraud made her an unstable primary parent. The recording of Jessica planning to divorce Dave and take his children while stealing my money was particularly damaging, showing not just dishonesty toward me, but calculated cruelty toward her own husband and a willingness to use her children as weapons. I learned the details from Dave himself, who called me in late July to let me know the custody arrangement had been finalized. "I got primary custody," he said, his voice heavy with relief and something that sounded like grief. "Monday through Friday, the kids live with me. Jessica gets them every other weekend and Wednesday evenings." The judge cited her fraudulent behavior and emotional instability as reasons to limit her time. He paused, and I could hear children's voices in the background, Tyler asking about dinner. "I wanted you to know because Emma's been asking about you. She misses you. They all do, actually, even though they don't fully understand what happened." "How is Emma handling everything?" I asked, thinking about that serious 12-year-old who'd tried to warn me with a note all those months ago. "She's struggling. She feels responsible somehow, like she should have stopped her mother or warned me earlier." I've got her in therapy, which helps, but she's lost most of her friends because their parents don't want them around our drama. His voice cracked slightly. I never wanted this for them. Any of this. They can call me any time, I said. Emma especially. She needs to know none of this is her fault. The divorce settlement left Jessica with almost nothing. Dave kept the house they'd owned together, taking on the mortgage in exchange for giving Jessica a minimal cash settlement that was immediately consumed by her share of the legal fees from my lawsuit. She moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a less expensive part of San Jose, the kind of complex with thin walls and a parking lot full of cars held together by duct tape and determination. 4 children in 2 bedrooms with Jessica sleeping on a pull-out couch in the living room, trying to rebuild a life from the wreckage she'd created. Ruth's intelligence network kept me informed of Jessica's circumstances even when I tried not to ask. Jessica had found work at a medical billing company, a desk job that paid $14 an hour and required her to learn software she'd never used before. But one job wasn't enough to cover rent, utilities, food, and childcare for the Wednesday evenings and weekends when she had the kids. She'd taken a second job working evening shifts at a retail store, which meant that on the weekends when the children were with her, she was exhausted and short-tempered trying to parent on 4 hours of sleep while worrying about bills she couldn't pay. The woman who'd once talked about investing $500,000 in a startup and refinancing a $2 million villa was now clipping coupons and buying generic cereal, calculating whether she could afford the gas to drive the kids to the park. It was a complete inversion of everything she'd expected her life to become, and I felt that complicated mix of satisfaction and pity that had become familiar over the past months. The first contact attempt came in August, a text message that arrived late on a Thursday night. Sarah, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm desperate. I can't afford childcare for Wednesday nights, and I'm about to lose my second job because I keep missing shifts. Could you please watch the kids just 1 night a week? I'll pay you when I can. Please, I'm drowning here. I stared at that message for a long time, imagining how easy it would be to slip back into the old pattern, to let her need become my responsibility, to sacrifice my boundaries because she was struggling. Then I thought about Grandmother May's letter about being strong, about protecting what was mine. I typed out my response carefully. Jessica, I'm not available to provide childcare. You should look into community resources or low-cost daycare options. I hope you find a solution. Her reply came immediately. Community resources. Are you serious? I'm your sister. My kids are your nieces and nephews. You have all this money and this huge house, and you can't spare 1 evening a week to help me. What kind of person are you? I didn't respond. I knew that anything I said would be used as an opening for more manipulation, more guilt, more attempts to pull me back into the role of family savior. So I let the message sit there unanswered, and eventually the typing indicator disappeared. She tried again 2 weeks later, this time with a different approach. Sarah, I've been going to therapy like you suggested to Mom and Dad. I'm working on myself. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did and how to be better. Part of that process is making amends. Can we meet for coffee? Just to talk. I want to apologize properly and maybe start rebuilding our relationship. The kids ask about you constantly. Emma cries because she misses you. That message was harder to ignore because it pushed buttons I didn't know I still had. The mention of therapy made me wonder if she was genuinely changing. The reference to Emma made my heart hurt. But I'd learned enough about manipulation to recognize that Jessica knew exactly which emotional levers to pull. I called Dave instead of responding to her. Is Jessica actually in therapy? I asked. Dave sighed. She went to 2 sessions after the custody hearing because the judge suggested it. She hasn't been back since April. She tells people she's in therapy because it makes her sound like she's working on herself, but it's not true. And Emma, is she crying about missing me? Emma misses you. Yes, but she's not crying about it. She understands better than Jessica thinks. She knows why you need distance from her mother. He paused. Sarah, Jessica's been telling people a version of this story where she's the victim and you're the villain. She's rewriting history in her own mind to make herself the wronged party. Don't let her pull you back in." I thanked him and blocked Jessica's number. It felt harsh, but it was necessary. Every message from her was an attempt to find a crack in my boundaries, a way to make me responsible for fixing the consequences of her own actions. She had 4 children to care for, 2 jobs that weren't enough, and an apartment she could barely afford. Those were real struggles, and part of me wanted to help despite everything. But help would mean enabling, would mean teaching her once again that no matter what she did, no matter how badly she treated me, I would eventually give in. It would mean sacrificing the boundaries I'd fought so hard to establish, and it would dishonor everything my grandmother had tried to protect me from. So I let her struggle. I let her face the full weight of the life she'd built on lies and manipulation. And I tried not to think too much about whether that made me strong or just cruel. The extended family found out about my parents' gambling debt in September when my father's older brother Richard opened the local newspaper and saw his brother's name in a legal notice. The court judgment against my parents had triggered a cascade of financial consequences, and creditors had begun filing liens against their property. Uncle Richard, a retired accountant who'd spent 40 years teaching financial responsibility, called my father immediately and demanded an explanation. I learned about this conversation from my cousin Helen, Uncle Richard's daughter, who called me with a mixture of sympathy and horror. "My dad is furious," she said. "He had no idea your parents were in debt, let alone that kind of debt from gambling. He asked your father point blank how much they owed, and when your dad tried to minimize it, my father pulled the court records himself. $83,000 to casinos and online gambling sites. Sarah, my father, nearly had a stroke." The revelation rippled through the Chen family network like a shockwave. My father had 3 siblings, all of whom had maintained the carefully cultivated image of the Chens as a respectable, financially stable family. My mother had 2 sisters, both of whom had always presented a united front of propriety and traditional values. The discovery that my mother had a gambling addiction severe enough to accumulate that kind of debt, and that my parents had conspired to commit fraud rather than face their problems, honestly shattered decades of family mythology. Uncle Richard's response was swift and uncompromising. He called a family meeting at his home in Palo Alto, inviting all the siblings and their spouses, but specifically excluding my parents. Helen told me what happened at that meeting, how Uncle Richard had laid out the court documents, the evidence of the conspiracy, and the detailed accounting of my parents' debts. My father said that the Chen family name had been built on honesty and hard work, and that he wouldn't associate with people who'd betrayed those values, Helen reported. He said your parents were no longer welcome at family gatherings until they'd paid their debts and made proper amends. My Uncle James and Aunt Susan agreed immediately. My mother's sisters were, if anything, even harsher. Aunt Margaret, the eldest, had always been the family matriarch, the one who organized holidays and maintained traditions. She'd been particularly close to Grandmother May, and when she learned that my mother had participated in a scheme to steal May's final gift to me, her fury was biblical. She wrote my mother a letter she showed me a copy months later that detailed every disappointment, every suspicion she'd held over the years about my mother's character, and ended with a declaration that she would not speak to my mother again until my mother had completed treatment for her addiction and made full restitution for her crimes. The social exile extended to the older generation as well. My grandmother's sister, Great Aunt Lily, who was 92 and the respected elder of the entire extended family, heard about the situation through the family grapevine and summoned my parents to her assisted living facility. She spoke to them in Cantonese, the language of her childhood and of serious family business, and told them they had dishonored May's memory and betrayed the family's trust. She said she would not see them again before she died, and that they should be ashamed to show their faces at family events. For my parents, who had built their entire identity around being respected members of the family and community, this wholesale rejection was devastating. They'd lost their church, their neighborhood standing, and now their own family. Every support system they'd relied on for validation and connection had evaporated. They appeared at my door on a gray October afternoon, both of them looking diminished in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. My mother's face was bare of makeup, her hair graying at the roots in a way she never would have allowed before. My father's shoulders curved inward, his usual rigid posture collapsed. They didn't ring the doorbell this time, just knocked quietly and waited. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. We stood in that familiar configuration, them outside me in the doorway, maintaining the boundary. "We need to talk," my father said. "Please, just listen." I nodded but said nothing. My mother spoke first, her voice stripped of the manipulation I'd grown so accustomed to hearing. "I have a gambling problem, a real addiction. I've known for years, but I kept telling myself I could stop any time, that it wasn't that bad, that one big win would fix everything." She looked at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. "It started small, just occasional trips to the casino with friends. Then online poker. Then I was betting money we didn't have on games I didn't understand, chasing losses, lying about where the money was going. By the time I admitted how bad it was, we owed more than $70,000. And instead of getting help, you tried to steal from me," I said quietly. "Yes." The word came from my father, flat and heavy with shame. "We were desperate, not malicious, but that doesn't excuse what we did. We thought if Jessica's plan worked, we could pay off the debt and no one would ever know. We convinced ourselves we were helping her, helping the family, when really, we were just trying to save ourselves from consequences we'd earned." "Jessica manipulated us," my mother added quickly. "She knew about the debt and she used it. Don't blame Jessica for your choices." I interrupted. "She didn't force you to conspire with her. You chose to participate because it benefited you." My father nodded slowly. "You're right. We made our own choices. And we're living with them now. The family won't speak to us. The church asked us to leave. We're facing bankruptcy because we can't pay the judgment and the debt together. We came here to ask—" He paused, swallowed. "We came to ask if your offer still stands. The payment plan with conditions." I considered them for a long moment. "The therapy conditions, yes. But I have a different offer now." I pulled out a piece of paper I'd prepared weeks ago, anticipating this conversation. "I will pay for intensive gambling addiction treatment for Mom. Inpatient if necessary, outpatient at minimum. I'll pay for family therapy sessions for both of you. And I'll pay for financial counseling to help you develop a sustainable budget and payment plan for your debts." My mother's face flooded with hope. "And the judgment, the $45,000? No. That you pay on your own $500 a month until it's done. The therapy is a gift, but the consequences are yours to handle. You need to fix yourselves, not have me fix you." "We can't afford the monthly payments and pay down our other debt," my father protested. "Then you make sacrifices. You downsize your house. You sell the car and buy something cheaper. You work extra hours. You do what I did for 15 years. You put your needs aside and handle your responsibilities." I held out the paper. "These are my terms. Take them or don't. But this is the only help I'm offering." My mother reached for the paper with shaking hands. "Why would you help us at all, after what we did?" "Because Grandmother May would want me to," I said simply. "She believed in helping people who wanted to help themselves. If you actually complete the treatment and do the work, maybe someday we can rebuild something. But it starts with you fixing what's broken, not with me rescuing you from consequences." They left with the paper, no promises made, just the weight of choice hanging between us. I didn't know if they'd take the offer or if pride would keep them from accepting help that came with accountability. But I'd done what I could, what felt right, what honored both boundaries and compassion. Whether they chose to save themselves was no longer my responsibility. The idea for the trust fund came to me in early November during a sleepless night, when I couldn't stop thinking about Emma's text message asking what to tell kids at school. The children were innocent in all of this. They hadn't chosen their mother's actions or their grandparents' conspiracy. They were just kids caught in the blast radius of adult dysfunction, and they deserved better than to have their futures limited by their family's mistakes. I called Patricia the next morning. I want to set up an education trust for my nieces and nephews, something Jessica can't touch, can't redirect, can't manipulate. Is that possible? Absolutely, Patricia said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Educational trusts are specifically designed to prevent exactly that kind of misuse. The funds can only be used for qualified educational expenses, tuition books fees, room and board at accredited institutions. We'll name an independent trustee to manage it, someone with no connection to your family, who'll make distributions based on documented need. We spent the next week designing the structure. I decided on $60,000 total, $15,000 allocated to each child. It wasn't enough to cover 4 years at an elite private university, but it would pay for community college, trade school, or make a significant dent in state university costs. The trust would activate when each child turned 16, allowing them to use funds for SAT prep college application fees and eventually tuition. Patricia recommended a professional trustee service that specialized in educational trusts, a firm that would review applications for funds, verify expenses, and ensure the money went directly to educational institutions rather than through Jessica's hands. The legal documents were meticulous. The trust agreement specified that beneficiaries were Emma Martinez, Tyler Martinez, Madison Martinez, and baby Sophia Martinez. Jessica was explicitly excluded from any decision-making role. She couldn't borrow against the trust, couldn't redirect funds, couldn't access the money for any reason. If any child chose not to pursue education, their portion would be split among the siblings who did. If all 4 declined higher education, the remaining funds would go to a scholarship program for children from families affected by parental incarceration or fraud. That last clause is important, Patricia explained. It prevents Jessica from pressuring the kids to skip college so she can claim the money somehow. If they don't use it, it goes to charity. There's no scenario where she benefits. I signed the papers in Patricia's office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, transferring $60,000 from my business savings into an irrevocable trust. It was a substantial amount, enough that I felt it, but not so much that it jeopardized my own security. As I watched Patricia notarize the final documents, I felt something loosen in my chest. This was what families should be: protecting children, investing in their futures, giving them opportunities. I'd almost lost myself. The question was how to tell Jessica. The restraining order was still in effect, prohibiting direct contact between us. All communication had to flow through attorneys or court-approved mediators. I could have simply let her find out when Emma turned 16 and applied for funds, but that felt cowardly. She deserved to know that her children had this resource, even if she couldn't control it. I drafted a letter with Patricia's input, choosing each word carefully. Jessica, I am writing to inform you that I have established an educational trust fund for Emma, Tyler, Madison, and Sophia. The trust contains funds designated solely for their educational expenses and is managed by an independent third-party trustee. You have no access to these funds and no role in their administration. This trust is my way of helping the children, directly ensuring they have opportunities regardless of our family's circumstances. I want to be clear, this is not reconciliation. This is not a door opening to renewed contact. The restraining order remains in full effect. I will not communicate with you outside of legal channels, and I will not provide financial assistance to you personally under any circumstances. However, I believe children should not suffer for their parents' mistakes. Emma, Tyler. Madison and Sophia deserve the chance to pursue education without the burden of debt or the limitation of resources. This trust is for them, not for you. Any attempt to manipulate them into accessing these funds for your benefit will be reported to the trustee and could result in additional legal action. I hope you will support their educational goals when the time comes. Sarah. Patricia sent the letter via certified mail, and the response came not from Jessica, but from a mediator Jessica had hired, a family counselor named Dr. Richard Park, who specialized in post-conflict family communication. His letter was professional and measured, acknowledging receipt of my notification and requesting a mediated conversation to discuss the trust and potential paths toward family healing. I declined the mediation request through Patricia. My client has established clear boundaries. The trust fund information was provided as a courtesy, not an invitation to negotiate new terms of contact. Ms. Martinez is welcome to seek healing through her own therapy, but Ms. Chen is not obligated to participate in that process. Dr. Park sent one more letter this time, including a handwritten note from Jessica that he'd agreed to pass along. I opened it with Patricia present, both of us reading the careful, measured words that Jessica had clearly workshopped with her mediator. "Sarah, thank you for thinking of my children's futures. I know I don't deserve your generosity after everything I've done. I'm in therapy now, real therapy twice a week, and I'm starting to understand the damage I caused. I'm not asking you to forgive me or to let me back into your life. I just want you to know that I'm grateful you're protecting my kids from my mistakes. They talk about you sometimes, especially Emma. She says you're the only adult who ever really listened to her. I'm trying to become someone worthy of being their mother. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. I won't contact you again unless you reach out first. I respect your boundaries now, even if I didn't before. Thank you for the trust. Thank you for caring about them, even when you couldn't care about me anymore. Jessica." I read the letter twice, looking for manipulation, for hidden asks, for the subtle guilt-tripping I'd learned to recognize. But it seemed genuine, or as genuine as Jessica was capable of being. I filed it away without responding. 2 weeks later, I received notification that my parents had enrolled in the gambling addiction treatment program I'd offered to fund. My mother had entered a 30-day inpatient facility, and my father had begun attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings 5 times a week. It wasn't reconciliation, wasn't forgiveness, but it was movement in a direction that might someday lead to something healthier. The restraining order would remain in place for another 18 months, renewable if necessary. Communication would continue to flow through lawyers and mediators, maintaining the distance I needed to protect what I'd rebuilt. I'd helped the children through a structure that prevented exploitation. I'd offered my parents a path to healing that required them to do the actual work. And I'd done it all while keeping my boundaries intact, proving to myself that compassion didn't require self-sacrifice, that helping didn't mean enabling, that I could care about my family's well-being without letting them destroy mine. It was a kind of love I'd never learned growing up, but it was the only kind I had left to give. The villa felt different once the legal battles ended and the restraining orders were in place. For the first time since inheriting it, the space was truly mine, without the shadow of family expectation or manipulation hanging over every room. I walked through it one December morning, nearly a year after that fateful Christmas, and realized I'd been living in my grandmother's house rather than making it my own. The furniture was still arranged exactly as May had left it. Her belongings filled the closets and cabinets. I'd been so busy defending the property that I'd never actually claimed it. The renovation started small. I hired a contractor to repaint the main living areas, choosing colors I loved, rather than maintaining May's preferred neutrals. Soft sage green for the living room, warm cream for the hallway, a bold terracotta for the kitchen that reminded me of sunset. As the painters worked, I went through my grandmother's belongings with care and intention, keeping what honored her memory, while releasing what no longer served the space. I found her photographs in boxes in the attic, decades of family history, documented in fading Polaroids and formal portraits. There was May as a young woman newly arrived from Hong Kong, standing in front of a tiny apartment with determination in her eyes. May on her wedding day, traditional red dress and phoenix crown. May holding my infant mother, then later holding infant me. I selected the best photos and had them professionally framed, creating a gallery wall in the dining room that told the story of her life. At the center, I hung the photo I loved most. May in her garden at age 70, dirt under her fingernails and joy on her face, surrounded by the roses she'd spent 40 years cultivating. The garden had been neglected during the months of legal chaos. Jessica's children had trampled the flower beds, and I'd been too preoccupied to maintain the careful pruning and feeding schedules May had taught me. In January, I hired a landscape designer who specialized in restoration, and together we brought May's garden back to life. We replaced the damaged rose bushes with heritage varieties. May would have loved, rebuilt the stone pathways she'd laid by hand, and installed a small fountain in the corner where she used to sit with her morning tea. I spent weekends working alongside the landscaper, my hands in the soil, reconnecting with the peaceful ritual of tending growing things. But the transformation that meant the most started with a conversation with Ruth over tea in February. She'd been talking about the neighborhood's struggle to provide after-school tutoring for kids whose parents worked long hours, how the library's program had lost funding, and families couldn't afford private tutors. "It's heartbreaking," she said. "These kids fall behind not because they're not smart, but because they don't have anyone to help with homework or explain difficult concepts." I looked around my villa at the guest wing that had sat empty since Jessica left, and an idea took root. What if we did something here, used that space for tutoring? Ruth's eyes lit up. "Sarah, that would be wonderful. But are you sure? After everything with your family inviting children into your home?" "These would be different," I said. "Kids who actually need help, whose families aren't trying to manipulate me. And it would honor May. She always said education was the key to everything." We started planning that afternoon. The guest wing had 3 rooms, a large bedroom, a sitting room, and a bathroom. I converted the bedroom into a library, lining the walls with bookshelves and filling them with donated books from community drives. The sitting room became a tutoring space with tables, chairs, and whiteboards. I commissioned a sign for above the door, "May Chen Library and Learning Center." Finding tutors was easier than expected. Ruth knew retired teachers eager to volunteer. I recruited graduate students from San Jose State University by offering modest stipends. We created a schedule Monday through Thursday evenings, free tutoring for elementary and middle school students in any subject. No registration fees, no income requirements, just a safe space where kids could get help with homework and discover that learning could be joyful. The center opened in March with 6 kids the first week. By April, we had 23 regular attendees. Parents would drop their children off after work, grateful for the supervision and academic support. I'd watch from my office window as kids arrived with backpacks and worried faces, then left hours later laughing with their tutors, finally understanding long division or essay structure or whatever had been troubling them. Emma heard about the tutoring center from one of her classmates whose younger brother attended. She called me in late April, the first time I'd heard her voice in months. "Aunt Sarah, it's Emma. I heard about what you're doing at the villa, the tutoring thing. That's really cool." "Thank you, sweetheart. How are you doing?" "Okay, I guess. Living with Dad is better, quieter." She paused. "I was wondering, I'm good at math and English, and I thought maybe I could volunteer. Help the younger kids. I'm only 13, so I couldn't be a real tutor, but maybe an assistant." My heart constricted with love for this girl who'd tried to warn me, who'd survived her mother's chaos, and who now wanted to help others. "I think that's a wonderful idea, but we'd need your dad's permission, and we'd need to make sure it doesn't violate the restraining order." We worked it out through lawyers and mediators. Dave enthusiastically supported the idea, seeing it as positive activity for Emma and a chance for her to reconnect with me in a structured, appropriate way. The restraining order was modified to allow supervised contact during tutoring center hours only. Emma started coming every Tuesday and Thursday evening, helping younger kids with reading and math, her serious face lighting up when a child finally grasped a concept she'd explained. Watching her work with those kids, I saw glimpses of who she might become with support and stability. She was patient, encouraging, and surprisingly creative in finding ways to make difficult subjects accessible. The other tutors loved her, and the younger children asked for her specifically. One evening in May, I overheard her helping a 3rd grader struggling with multiplication tables using M&Ms to visualize the math in a way that made the girl laugh and finally understand. "You're a natural teacher," I told Emma afterward as we cleaned up the learning center. She ducked her head, pleased but embarrassed. "I like helping. It makes me feel like I'm good at something, like even though everything at home is messed up, I can still do something that matters. You matter, Emma. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Don't forget that. She hugged me, then quick and fierce before gathering her backpack. Dave picked her up at 7:30, always prompt, always polite, maintaining the boundaries we'd all agreed to. As I watched them drive away, Emma waving from the passenger window, I felt the sharp ache of loving someone I couldn't fully have in my life, yet mixed with gratitude that at least this much was possible. The villa had become something more than a property to defend. It was a living memorial to my grandmother, a gift to the community, and a space where children could discover their potential. The rooms Jessica had tried to claim now rang with the voices of kids learning that adults could be trustworthy, that help didn't always come with strings attached, that education could open doors they'd thought were locked forever. May would have loved every minute of it. Emma's Tuesday and Thursday visits evolved into something more over the summer months. She'd arrive at 5:30, help with tutoring until 7, then stay for dinner that I'd started preparing for us both. We'd eat at the kitchen table where May used to teach me to fold dumplings, and Emma would tell me about school, her friends, the books she was reading. These quiet evenings became the foundation of a relationship that felt different from anything I'd had with my family before, honest reciprocal built on mutual respect rather than obligation. In late June, Dave called me with a request that surprised me. Emma's been talking non-stop about the time she spends with you. Tyler and Madison have started asking when they can see Aunt Sarah, too. I know the restraining order complicates things, but I was wondering if we could arrange a supervised visit. All 4 kids me present the whole time, maybe at a park or somewhere neutral if the villa feels like too much. I considered the request carefully. Tyler was 9 now, Madison 7, and baby Sophia was crawling and babbling at 8 months. I'd missed so much of their lives over the past year, protecting myself from their mother's toxicity. But they weren't Jessica. They were just children who'd lost access to an aunt they'd once loved. Not a park, I said. Here, the garden. May would want them to see what we've done with her roses. We set the visit for a Saturday afternoon in early July, with Ruth present as an additional witness to ensure everything stayed appropriate and documented. I spent the morning anxious rearranging furniture that didn't need rearranging, second-guessing the decision, wondering if I was opening myself up to more pain. But when Dave's car pulled into the driveway, and I saw Tyler's face pressed against the window, eyes wide at the sight of the villa he'd been banished from, something settled in my chest. Emma bounded out first, immediately running to hug me. Tyler followed more cautiously, hanging back near his father. Madison clutched her stuffed elephant, watching me with uncertain eyes. Dave lifted Sophia from her car seat, the baby girl I'd only seen in that single photograph from the night she was born. "Come see the garden," I said, gesturing toward the back where May's roses were in full summer bloom. "It's different from when you were here before." We walked through the house, and I watched Tyler notice the changes. The new paint colors, the photo gallery of Grandmother May, the tutoring center visible through the open door. "This is where Emma helps kids," he said, pointing. "She talks about it all the time." In the garden, the transformation was complete. The roses May had loved climbed trellises in shades of coral and cream and deep crimson. The fountain burbled peacefully. Stone paths wound between carefully tended beds of lavender and sage. I'd set out a blanket and brought lemonade and cookies, creating a space that felt welcoming rather than formal. Madison approached me first, still clutching her elephant. "Aunt Sarah, are you still mad at us?" The question hit me like a fist to the sternum. "Oh, sweetheart, I was never mad at you. I was mad at your mom and at Grandma and Grandpa, but never at you kids. You didn't do anything wrong." "But we lived here and made it messy and you had to kick us out." Her bottom lip trembled. I knelt down to her level, mindful of Dave and Ruth watching. "Your mom made choices that meant you couldn't stay here. That wasn't your fault. You were just kids being kids. I'm not angry at you, I promise." Tyler edged closer, his hands jammed in his pockets. "I'm sorry we took over your house. I'm sorry Mom lied about being sick. I heard Dad talking on the phone about it. I didn't know she was lying when it was happening, but I'm sorry anyway." Me too, Emma added quietly. I tried to warn you at Christmas, but I should have done more. I should have told you everything I knew. I felt tears prickling my eyes. Emma, you were 12 years old. You did exactly what you could do, and it helped more than you know. None of this is on any of you children. You hear me? You are not responsible for your mother's choices or your grandparents' choices. You're just responsible for being good kids and growing up to be good people. Sophia chose that moment to reach for me from Dave's arms, her chubby hands opening and closing. Dave smiled. She doesn't know any of the complicated stuff. She just sees someone new to charm. He handed her to me carefully, and I held my youngest niece for the first time, this baby girl who'd been born on the day her mother's world collapsed. We spent 3 hours in that garden. The kids explored every path, examined every flower, played a complicated game of their own invention around the fountain. Emma showed Tyler and Madison the tutoring center, and Tyler asked shyly if he could come sometime for help with his reading. Dave and I sat on the bench May used to favor watching them play while Sophia dozed against my shoulder. You taught me something important, Dave said after a long, comfortable silence. Watching you stand up to Jessica, to your parents, watching you enforce boundaries, even when it was hard, you showed me it was possible. I'd spent years thinking I had to accept her treatment because that's what marriage meant, what family meant. You proved that wasn't true. I learned that from my grandmother, I admitted. She spent her whole life watching me be a doormat, and her final gift was showing me how to stop. Well, I'm teaching the kids what you taught me. Dave gestured toward Tyler, who was carefully helping Madison across a stepping stone path. Boundaries aren't mean. Saying no isn't selfish. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Those are lessons Jessica never learned, but her kids are going to learn them. How is she doing? I asked, surprising myself with the question. Dave's expression was complicated. She's surviving, working hard, trying. She asks about the kids constantly. The therapy seems to be helping, though I don't know if she'll ever fully understand what she did. He paused. She asks about you sometimes too, whether you're doing okay, if you're happy. You can tell her I'm doing well, better than I've been in years, actually. I will. Dave smiled slightly. You know what's strange? I feel like I'm getting to know you for the first time. When I was married to Jessica, you were just her sister, someone defined by her relationship to my wife. But you're actually a remarkable person on your own. The tutoring center, the trust fund for the kids, the boundaries you've maintained while still showing compassion, it's impressive. We talked until the afternoon shadows grew long and Sophia woke up hungry. As Dave gathered the children to leave, each of them hugged me goodbye. Tyler held on an extra moment and whispered, Can we come back? Anytime your dad says it's okay. I promised. After they left, Ruth and I cleaned up the garden while the summer evening settled around us. That was healing, Ruth observed. For all of you. She was right. I'd been so afraid that any connection to Jessica's children would pull me back into the toxic patterns I'd escaped. But this afternoon had shown me something different, that I could love my nieces and nephews, could be part of their lives, without sacrificing the boundaries that protected me from their mother. Family didn't have to be all or nothing. I could choose which relationships to nurture and which to keep at a distance. I could have Tyler and Madison and Sophia and Emma without having Jessica. I could give the children stability and love without enabling their mother's dysfunction. And somehow in learning to stand up for myself, I'd accidentally taught Dave and Emma to do the same, creating a ripple effect of healthier patterns that might change these children's entire trajectory. As I watered May's roses in the golden evening light, I thought about how inheritance worked. My grandmother had left me property and money. Yes, but more importantly, she'd left me the example of strength and the tools to claim it. And now I was passing something similar to my nieces and nephews, not money or houses, but the knowledge that they deserved respect, that boundaries were acts of love, that they could break cycles that had run in our family for generations. It was a better legacy than anything Jessica had ever tried to steal. Christmas arrived again, and this time the villa felt entirely different. The tree stood in the same corner where it had a year ago, decorated with ornaments May had collected over decades, but everything else had transformed. The dining table was set for 8, not for the tense family gathering of the previous year, but for the people I'd chosen to share this holiday with. Ruth had arrived early to help with preparations, her arms full of her famous gingerbread cookies. My business partner Karen and her wife were bringing wine and stories, and Dave would arrive at 4 o'clock with all 4 children, our weekly visits having evolved into a steady rhythm of chosen family. I stood in the kitchen rolling out pie dough, May's old recipe card propped against the flour canister, and marveled at how much had changed in 12 months. The lawsuit seemed like something from another lifetime, though the consequences still rippled through my family in ways both visible and hidden. My parents had completed their addiction treatment and were making slow, painful progress on repaying the judgment through the payment plan I'd offered. We exchanged brief formal emails every few months through our attorneys. There was no warmth there yet, maybe never would be, but there was accountability, and that felt like enough. The doorbell rang at 3:30 earlier than expected, and I opened it to find a postal worker with a certified letter requiring signature. My stomach clenched reflexively. Certified mail still triggered anxiety after everything but the return address showed a mediation service, not a court. I signed for it and carried the envelope to May's old desk, the one piece of furniture I'd kept exactly where she'd left it. Inside was a letter on plain paper, Jessica's handwriting immediately recognizable, despite being neater than I remembered, more controlled. Sarah, I know you didn't ask for this letter and you don't owe me a response. Dr. Park said I should write it anyway as part of my accountability work. I've been in real therapy for 9 months now, twice a week, no skipping. I got a promotion at the medical billing company and picked up weekend shifts at a coffee shop instead of retail because the hours work better with the kids' schedule. I'm barely keeping my head above water financially, but I'm doing it without scheming or manipulating or using people. That's new for me. I'm learning that I built my whole identity around getting things from others, because I never learned to create anything for myself. I'm learning that I destroyed relationships because I saw people as resources instead of humans. I'm learning that the worst thing I ever did wasn't trying to steal your house, it was taking you for granted for 15 years before that. The kids tell me about their visits with you. Emma talks about the tutoring center like it's magic. Tyler is reading at grade level now because of the help you arranged. Madison said you let her pick flowers from May's garden to press in a book. And Sophia, who I'm only with on weekends, lights up when she sees your picture. You're giving them something I never could: stability, boundaries, adults they can trust. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even think I deserve it. But I want you to know I'm trying to become someone who wouldn't do what I did. Someone who might someday be worthy of being their mother. Someone who could look May in the eye without shame. I know you won't write back. That's okay. I just needed you to know I'm finally trying. Jessica. I read it twice, looking for manipulation, for hidden asks, for the subtle guilt-tripping I'd learned to detect. But it seemed genuine, or as genuine as Jessica was capable of being. I folded it carefully and placed it in the desk drawer without responding. Maybe she was changing. Maybe therapy was actually helping. But my healing didn't require me to witness or validate hers. She could become a better person without my participation, and that was exactly as it should be. As I closed the drawer, I noticed a small leather-bound book I'd never seen before tucked in the back corner. I pulled it out carefully, recognizing May's handwriting on the cover. Personal Reflections, 2018-2023. Her diary from the last 5 years of her life, hidden away in a desk I'd used but never fully explored. I opened it to a random page dated 3 months before she died. Watched Sarah today at family dinner. She made herself so small again, apologizing for taking up space, rushing to serve everyone else before eating her own food. Linda criticized her business choices, and Sarah just nodded and said she'd think about it, like her own judgment means nothing. I wanted to shake her and tell her to stop, but I know that doesn't work. People don't learn strength from being told. They learn it from having no other choice. That's why I'm leaving her the villa with protections they can't break. She'll need to be strong to keep it, and once she learns she can be strong there, maybe she'll learn she can be strong everywhere. I turned pages, finding more observations, more of May's quiet worry about me and her frustration with my parents' treatment of me. Then near the end, dated just weeks before her death, I found the passage that made my breath catch. Sarah came to visit today. She's thinking of breaking up with Marcus because Linda says long distance won't work. I told her what I've been trying to tell her for years. Don't be afraid to be strong. Boundaries aren't cruelty, they're self-love. Saying no doesn't make you selfish, it makes you whole. She smiled and changed the subject like she always does. But I hope she remembers this someday. I hope when I'm gone and she has the villa and they come for it like I know they will, she remembers that I believed she could be strong. That strength was always there, just waiting for permission to exist. Tears blurred my vision as I closed the diary. May had known. She'd seen everything predicted, everything, and built me an escape route because she knew I couldn't build one for myself. And she'd been right. I'd needed to be backed into a corner, to have no choice but to fight, before I could discover the strength that had been waiting inside me all along. The doorbell rang again, and this time it was Dave with the children. Emma rushed in carrying a container of cookies she'd baked Tyler and Madison, arguing cheerfully about whose turn it was to help decorate the tree, and Sophia toddling on unsteady legs, grabbing my knees for support the moment she saw me. The house filled with noise and laughter and the chaotic energy of children who felt safe and loved. Ruth had already started organizing the cookie decorating station in the kitchen, laying out frosting and sprinkles with the precision of a retired teacher who'd supervised thousands of craft projects. Karen and her wife arrived with wine and hugs, admiring the transformation of the house, exclaiming over the photo gallery and the tutoring center. We gathered in May's kitchen, in the space where she'd once taught me to roll dumplings, and told me I was worth more than I believed. Emma stood beside me as we rolled out sugar cookie dough, her hands dusted with flour, her expression serious with concentration. Madison decorated cookies with more enthusiasm than precision, creating rainbow disasters that she declared were abstract art. Tyler carefully read the recipe aloud, practicing his new reading skills. And Sophia sat in her high chair, gumming a piece of cookie dough with gleeful determination. Looking around at these people I'd chosen, this family I'd built from the rubble of the one I'd been born into, I felt something settle in my chest that I'd been chasing my whole life. Not the desperate need to be needed, not the anxious performance of perfection. Just peace, just belonging earned through honesty rather than sacrifice. That Christmas night 1 year ago had changed everything. My family had tried to take my home, and in defending it, I'd discovered what home actually meant. Not a building, though I loved this villa with its roses and memories, but the freedom to choose who deserved my love, the strength to walk away from people who saw me as a resource, the wisdom to know that boundaries weren't walls to keep people out, but foundations that let the right people in. I'd spent 15 years making myself smaller so others could be bigger. And then I'd finally given myself the greatest gift, freedom to choose who deserves my love. Sarah's journey reminds us that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to establish boundaries, and to choose who truly deserves a place in your life. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is simply say no to those who've taken advantage of us for too long. Family should be built on respect, not obligation. Love should never require you to disappear. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever struggled with setting boundaries or dealing with toxic family dynamics, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family loyalty and self-preservation? What did you learn from that experience? Your story might help someone else who's going through something similar right now. Please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss stories like this one. Every subscribe helps us continue sharing these important narratives about courage, boundaries, and reclaiming your power. And if you found value in Sarah's story, consider sharing this video with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in our struggles makes all the difference. Don't forget to like this video if Sarah's journey inspired you, and check out the other stories on our channel about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. Remember, standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's healthy. and it might just save your life. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.